Good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you to SNS. I'm Elinka Benson, the CEO of SNS, and it's a great pleasure for me to have you all here today for our second conference in our series, Making Better Use of Research, that we launched last year when we celebrated our 75th anniversary. And before saying anything else, I would really like to extend a great thank you to our donors for the fund that we put together in order to celebrate our anniversary. And when doing that, we really thought of how can we make this anniversary useful for SNS now and in the future. I mean, of course, we want to sort of bring out our legacy and our history, but the most important for us is, of course, to make SNS thrive now and going on. And as you probably well know, SNS has been committed to the task of bringing research-based evidence to decision makers in both policy and business since the start in 1948. Our mission is to gather people like yourselves from academia, business, politics, and public sector to share knowledge, analyze societal problems of various kinds, as well as discussing possible improvements and ways forward. And we do this on a daily basis in our different research projects, ranging from the energy transition to preventions of organized crime. But with this conference, we would like to contribute more specifically to the discussions on how to enhance policy making with research-based evidence and methods by bringing good examples from other countries here to the SNS stage in order to learn and to exchange knowledge and experiences with each other. And so this is what we will do here today. And I really also want to encourage all of you to engage in this conversation that we will have both from stage and with you, both with questions, but also with your reflections and comments and experiences. And there will be ample of opportunity for that throughout the day, both here and of course outside when we have pauses and lunch. But now I have the great pleasure of welcoming our two keynote speakers from the British government, who have long experiences from working systematically with these issues of evaluation of policy and also bringing evidence to policy development and evaluation. And they are Catherine Hutchinson and Miriam Light. Catherine Hutchinson is with the Department for Work and Pensions, and Miriam Light is from the Evaluation Task Force, which we will hear more from soon. And I would also like to welcome our other speakers that will bring the discussion to the Swedish context and reflect both on the work being done in the UK, but also, of course, of what are we doing in Sweden and what are both the challenges and the successes that we have here, and what can we learn from each other. So with those words, I would like to welcome Catherine up on stage. And Catherine is the Chief Analyst, Chief Scientific Advisor, and Director of Central Analysis and Science Directorate at the Department for Work and Pensions of the British government. So very welcome, Catherine. A warm round of applause.
You can see with my 3 job titles, I like to get value for money out of these. Thank you first for listening in English. I know that it's difficult to listen in a foreign language, so I will try to use as less jargon as possible, but as I'm from a government department, that is pretty much against my nature, so you'll have to tolerate me. Okay, so I was asked to talk about how you can improve government with robust evidence. And actually, at the moment, I work for the Department for Work and Pensions, but I've worked across different government departments the whole of my career, trying to get evidence into crime and criminal justice, to get into the way we deliver education and international development. So I can try to use examples from across my career. So do feel free to ask me any questions on any topic. I will give them my best go. Okay, so who am I? I've told you already that I've worked across different government departments, but as the chief analyst in the Department for Work and Pensions, my job essentially is to make sure that every number, every bit of analysis, every piece of research that we used is of a high quality, but also effectively changes the way we make decisions. So my job is to be that really annoying person in a room that says, oh, but have you thought of? And oh, actually, that choice, we've done that before and this was the result. Or would you like to know exactly how many people that affects? And it's a really interesting job because it means that I'm essentially loved and hated. So everybody wants a number. Everybody wants to be able to justify their choice. But equally, quite a lot of the time, the things that I'm suggesting or saying don't necessarily always support the choice that is initially put forward. So the topic is important to me because many years ago, when I even started in government, I can remember telling my family what I did and just seeing the sheer surprise on their face that that was a job. Like, what? People don't follow evidence? I don't understand. How is that even a job? But surely no rational person makes choices that isn't based on evidence. And I sort of had to explain, but it's a process. Actually, decision making involves lots of people, lots of trade-offs, and often lots of sort of hard choices that evidence is part of, but doesn't necessarily always, can't always be the deciding factor. So for me, I'm very passionate about it because over the years, I've done lots of evaluations that have shown things don't work or things do work or things have worked in a way that's been unexpected. And without the evidence, without the data, without the research, we'd still be doing lots of things that just don't have the impact. And as a taxpayer myself, I want to make sure that absolutely every pound, every krona that we have is driving the outcomes that we want. And actually, we're not doing some things to people that actually are a waste of their time and ours. Because I think a lot of very well-intentioned stuff happens, but actually it doesn't have the impact you want. So for me, it's very personally important. So how do I think you can ultimately change the way that government runs to be able to be more evidence-led? For me, there are three areas that I'm going to talk about. One, how you build a culture of evidence-based policymaking, what those challenges are to be able to achieve that, and then some examples of high-quality evaluation. So we can all be inspired at the end that actually sometimes it is possible, and in some occasions we get things right, occasionally. So how do you build a culture of evidence-based policymaking? There is, for me, three key elements to changing a culture. So a culture is basically made up of lots of tiny behaviours that together essentially change the way an organisation operates. And you can't just one day say, we are going to be evidence-based and everybody's just going to do it, right? It just doesn't work because I don't know if anyone's ever tried to lose weight or exercise more. Like, you just don't. You're like really well-intentioned at the beginning and then we all get lazy and we just go back to the way we were before. So my magic recipe to try to change that is threefold. You need somebody to say it's important and that person needs to be important. Okay? Because ultimately, we're all rational individuals, and we'll say, okay, everything's a priority. Everything is very important to do in government. So, are we definitely sure that the decision maker is going to appreciate evidence in the situation and take it into account? So, the more senior that you can get somebody to champion it, somebody to say, the better. So while I was in Cabinet Office, which is the sort of headquarters function for government, I made sure that I met the head of the civil service regularly, almost as not as a threat, but almost as by the way, I see the head of the civil service and it's great to tell them how wonderful your work is on this area. And it's just helpful nudges, right? It's helpful signals to the rest of government that actually senior people find that important. And through those sorts of things, if you can get Treasury involved to control spend, you're sending a signal, right? You just need one or two occasions where something wasn't funded because of the evidence wasn't great. And it sends a signal. People go, oh, did you hear that? That programme? Still waiting to get funding because apparently it doesn't work. Or they've still got to change something. And that helps. It sends a signal that actually evidence is a priority, that it will be listened to, and that somebody will do something as a result. Otherwise, the first time that somebody doesn't listen to you just becomes a new routine, and that's the same way, and they'll go back to their old behavior. But you can't rely on a big stick or on somebody saying something is fantastic. You need a system and a structure to change, because ultimately people will follow the process that is set out. So you need to get nudges, to get incentives or questions in a process that open the door to evidence. An example of that was when I was in Department for Education and the old government came in at first. And they asked, while I was there, to just insert a single question, which is, have we evaluated this policy? So before you could send anything up for approval for more spending, they just asked the question, have we evaluated this policy? And if not, do you have plans? And that just increased the number of evaluations that happened, because part of the approvals process asked for it. Like it didn't say you had to do it. It just asked, have you got an evaluation? And those sorts of just signals, those sorts of processes and system changes make a huge difference. Again, approvals processes. I now sit on the investment committee for Department for Work and Pensions. You have an analyst at the table while new projects and programs are being discussed about whether they should have funding or not. And so I just ask questions. I'm in the process. The people who are looking for funding know that I'll be there. So they now come to me before the meeting and say, oh, hi, Catherine, you're my best friend. It's great to see you. And we're really looking for this funding. It's so helpful. Is there something we can do that will reassure you at the approvals panel? Those things, having an analyst at the table, having a process that asks particular questions, having a system that tracks it to say, you promised you have an evaluation. Where is that evaluation? Is that published? Where is that going? Helps course correct. And actually, if you don't have it as a system, you can't just say this thing is normal, because it isn't. You need to normalize it. You say, yeah, actually, it is normal. In every process now, we just ask if there's an evaluation. That's the expectation. That's the new normal behavior. So for me, I found the processes, the incentives, the changing to the way an organization structures provides a lot of signal. The third part about changing culture is about capability. You can't ask people to produce evaluations if they don't know how. They don't know what a good quality evaluation looks like. If they don't have analysts within their team, if they can't access evidence and it's not easy to understand. The number of times I have received a report that now I'm an analyst, I can't even read it. And I'm like, I do not understand what they're trying to say. We need to make evidence accessible. We need to upskill people so that they understand what is a good quality evaluation and what isn't. We need to help people deliver the evaluations and the evidence and the data that you want. Because otherwise you can ask me to do as much exercise as you like, but if I physically don't understand what you want me to do, I'm not going to do it. Okay, so the key lessons for me: have senior champions. Find them, make them your best friend, get them to say often and frequently that they care about the thing that you're interested in. So it's amazing that you have Jesper here. Reduce the distance between policy officials and analysts so that people can understand, your academics understand the context that they're trying to deliver something in. Otherwise, you will get something that bears no resemblance to the decisions that are being made. You need to make those people closer together so that you are providing high quality, but also relevant information to those that need it. Encourage curiosity and experimentation. Most people's fear, the reason they don't evaluate, because they think their thing isn't going to be found to work. It's embarrassing, right? What, you mean you're going to scrutinize it? I'm going to have to, who am I reporting to and about what? And we just need to get on with it. Try to get them to experiment, change the language, change the way you're talking about it. Do small testing so it's less embarrassing if things go wrong. Small scale pilots are much more rapid ways of being able to safely be curious. Be transparent, publish it, tell people, because if your problem, I'm sure the problems in the UK, I am sure, are identical to the problems in Sweden. Do we tell you when things go wrong? Not enough. We should be sharing the things that don't work as often as the things that do, and we should be much more transparent about learning, because that's the only way we're going to get better. So I'm trying to do that. In fact, with our change of government, we published 30 social research reports and evaluations from my department. So we're trying to get out stuff that both works and doesn't. We should be celebrating success and trying to create a broad sense of belonging, and just keep measuring, keep real time considering what you're doing and whether it's working. So challenges and solutions. essentially, the biggest threats to being able to evaluate something well is just flicking a switch. You go for full national rollout before it perfect full national rollout before we've even tried something. I have tried telling people, have you ever done something on a national scale that you've never tried before and it is absolutely perfect the first time? Like, as great as you guys are, chances of it being perfect really small. Give yourself a break, give yourself a chance here. Try something on a smaller scale first, test it, learn, then roll out nationally. If you don't, we don't have a chance at all of being able to tell whether it's effective, and we can't do. So piloting really helps there. The other thing we have seen in lots of different policy contexts is there's a problem. People throw everything at it simultaneously. Like, oh my gosh, we've got an obesity epidemic or a crime wave. Right, we're going to put people out. We're going to get local and national policies, and we're going to get charities involved. And you can't tell which one is working. And my guess is that at least one of them isn't, and one of them is, and they're probably cancelling each other out. So trying to isolate the effects of different projects and programs helps. And it helps you be more ruthless in the targeting of what you need to achieve for the people that you need it to work for. Data, I don't know. I think Scandinavia has a much stronger data architecture than we do. Sharing data between departments. So we have a joint work and health department within my department. We still have no health information, because actually the way that health data is shared, we haven't asked the British citizens whether they'd be happy to share it with my department. They're only happy to share it for health purposes. So it's quite difficult for us to be able to understand the right approaches we should be taking, because data sharing just currently isn't where it needs to be. Also, what data, where do we capture it, what format? Even where I am, the different ways you could enter somebody's name or the different systems it sits on means that it's quite difficult to conduct any analysis. So we are doing lots of stuff to tackle that. The other thing is context. So essentially, all it takes is one crisis away from your project being sort of sidelines. Often you get political pressure or other things that happen that mean you have to speed up a rollout of something, or it means that something suddenly becomes much more politically interesting, or you have a broader scale change. The pandemic, for example, would have changed most of people's evaluations or research projects. Policies are both the best thing that ever happened to analysis in departments and the worst. So new ideas, fantastic. They're being generated. We should be testing them. It's also political life cycles are such that people need to show an impact before they're going to be re-elected. And so there is a real hunger for a much faster, quicker turnaround. And in many cases, that's a good challenge to us about how we can genuinely make something relevant and how some evidence is better than none. But equally, there are some very long-term issues that we do just need time to see whether that thing makes a difference. And that can be quite difficult to do. So when has it been possible? I've got 3 examples, one where it worked, one where it didn't work, and one where I just think it's interesting to share the approach. The one where it worked was our health-led trials. So in Department for Work and Pensions, we are very interested in getting those who are unwell back into work. The health-led trials were set up to try to close the gap between people who have disabilities and those who don't, and to try to get 1 million more disabled people back into work. Currently, those who are too unwell to work is a significant issue for the UK. We have 3 million people who are too unwell to work. As a scale for what Department for Work and Pensions spends, we spend around £1 billion a day on benefits. So when I worked it out in krona, that is 14 billion krona a day. And that's only going up. No, sorry, not 14 krona a day. 14 krona a day, because it's 4.6 trillion krona a year. So 1 in 4 pounds spent by the British government is spent by my department. So we are a huge spender. So even small changes within our department make a huge difference to the rest of the budget that you could be spending on improving schools or hospitals. We have a huge, responsibility for getting people to have healthy lives. Right? If you are in a location where you can't find work or you're too unwell to work, if we're not helping you, what's your future looking like? Long-term unemployment that probably leads to depression, anxiety, lots of other. What's the outcomes for your children? What can they afford? What can they do? And there's quite strong links between unemployment and child poverty. So we have a moral responsibility as well as a financial responsibility to make sure that we're delivering better outcomes. So we delivered health-led trials. So we're trying to help people with mild to moderate health conditions return to the workforce. It was a great ambition. We spent around £18 million on the intervention itself and about £3 million on the evaluation, which you're going to go, gosh, that's expensive. Why would you have spent such a lot? Because actually the results showed, it was our largest trial that we'd ever done, showed it was extremely effective. And since then, we're now spending 1.4 billion on this program, because just a small trial, in the scale of it, a small trial to show that this works to get people with mild to moderate health conditions back to work can now be scaled up nationally and can now help us make huge savings across the country. So this has now been a new program we're launching this year called Connect to Work, and it will help us get a very large number of people back into the workplace and generate economic activity. Ones that don't work, so as much as we can pull our heartstrings for these people who are unemployed and linking to child poverty, people are also very keen to stop children going into care. One of the early ideas was to get prevention. So prevention is a very popular approach where you're trying to stop a problem before it starts. And by putting social workers into schools, they thought that children would be able to approach them, you'd be able to early identify children in need, and you'd be able to stop them ultimately going into care. Roughly, it costs around £90,000 a year for a social worker. There aren't enough social workers in the UK, and so actually it's quite difficult to find them. The trial found that they didn't work, made no impact at all. And that's great news for us, right? Because you can save £90,000 per school, but also you can redeploy social workers who are really in short supply somewhere else into the system where they then can make a bigger and better difference. Not all the time, but this occasion, the Department for Education used this to be able to stop the funding to that programme and stopped this continuing. So it was a great win for evidence-based policymaking. And then the last one, bear with me, this is improving land rights in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, I did used to work in international development, but the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because it gives two good examples of things that I think aren't done enough. The basic premise of this essentially is that if you own your own land, you are then more likely to be more economically prosperous. It gives more security. People are more likely to invest, and it generates very good development outcomes. But the trial involved two different things. The first one was testing dose. So how much of a subsidy do you need to be able to shift behaviour? So lots of people might say, oh, well, if you just reduce the cost of something, it will encourage people to do that activity. But by how much? And we hardly ever test the quantity of the thing that we're doing. We do sometimes in my department, we've tested the number of times you need someone to turn up to a job centre to get them back to work, how frequently, whether that's every day or every week or every month or never. But this is a useful thing because actually evaluation just isn't a blunt tool about whether something works or not, but actually can help you, what's the nice way of saying it? Help you modify it and optimize it so that you are delivering it in the best possible way. The other reason that I wanted to talk about this is because it links to an approach called the Medverkande model, which was a made-up word that I made up when I worked in international development. And essentially, it's the approach that you can do the same intervention, but in different countries. And so then the effect size you find tells you the impact of the cultural context that that's being delivered in. And lots of people often look at evidence and they say, oh yeah, but that's from the UK. You guys are totally different. Or, oh, that's from Sweden or from America. We can't possibly translate it here. And I did a whole suite of these trials in very different cultural contexts to show it, to make it very obvious what that difference is and what sorts of things you do need to take notice of and the sorts of things that you don't. And I was just talking to a couple of colleagues before, and actually human nature is very similar. There are differences and there are changes. So, you can't implement the same thing in an authoritarian regime as you can in a fine. But lots of things that we do, lots of things that lots of other countries do, are pretty much the same. So this was just a useful nudge for me to talk about both testing dose, so you can optimize your delivery, but also ways that you can explicitly test culture. So in summary, cultural change, you need a multi-pronged approach. You need to think about your senior sponsors, you need to think about your systems and processes, and you need to think about your capability. There are challenges, of course. Do you know what? If it was easy, I wouldn't have a job, and neither would many of you. So we're probably lucky that these challenges exist, and it is fascinating to try to solve them. Evaluations do make a difference. Data does make a difference, but you need to think about how you're going to land that message, who you need to influence and talk to get that delivered, and actually, what are you hoping to achieve? So in many cases, it isn't that policy is not going to happen. It's more, how can that policy be optimized? How can that policy be delivered in the best possible way? And actually, what can we take from other areas that will make that most effective? My now only piece of Swedish tack. Do you have any questions?
I'm Anders Forslund from the IFAU in Uppsala. I will be taking part in the panel in Swedish later. I wondered, do you try to publish academically the research you undertake in this government agency in order to kind of get external tests of what you do?
We publish very little academically. We tend to put it on our website and hope that someone finds it. I'm not sure how. I'm very keen to change that because I've had to Google to find things that I've worked on, and it is hard.
And a related question. So, how is it for you to get the right people working for you? Because I think if you are an academic scholar, you think a great incentive for doing this kind of work would be to be academically published. So what do you do to sort of attract the right people?
Pensions, job security. So we try to make career development an important part. We try to emphasize the impact. So I suppose the other side of the academic coin is that we can offer genuine policy impact. Lots of people get excited about working with policy development and feel that the sorts of things, I can remember when I first joined the prison service, I felt very proud that the things that people could see on the news were things that I was working on. But yes, it is hard. People do sometimes do academic publications, but that's not normal for us. But it is hard, and trying to encourage people, particularly data scientists or data when they could go and work in the city or do something, like lots of people who are, we have to model the number of working age adults to try to, those people who are doing that modeling could earn a lot more money. So we're relying essentially on a sense of public spirit that you want to do something better for your fellow citizens.
And is that spirit thriving?
Enough, yes. We'd obviously have vacancies that we would love people to come and fill, but I think we get it. We're trying to do partnerships with universities at the moment so people don't lose that. We're trying to have academic secondments. We're trying to provide careers for people early on, apprenticeships. So you can now do an apprenticeship, which helps people get a degree while they're working with us, that are providing much better routes to that. But yeah, it is difficult, particularly for some areas.
And generally, when you recruit, do you recruit people who have a research background, or where do they come from, the people you recruit?
Where do they come from? We normally steal them from other government departments, charities, but so large volume of our recruitment will be through graduates.
Right.
So graduates who are new entrants coming in, a lot of work we do, we sometimes contract that work out to agencies, large evaluation agencies, and they often then in turn come back to work. But yeah, it is hard. Universities, other government departments, internationally. Sorry, we do steal people internationally.
So any more questions right now for Catherine? Otherwise, there will be a second opportunity. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Pleasure, thank you.
And now I would like to welcome Miriam Light on stage. You are the evaluation lead at the Evaluation Task Force, which is a joint unit between Cabinet Office and the Treasury of the British government. And it's a rather new initiative. So it will be very exciting to hear more about it. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Yes, here I am. Thanks, well, very nice to be here. Nice to see everyone. I am Miriam Light. And in this unit in the Cabinet Office that I'm going to talk to you about, to give you a little introduction to the work that we do. I think it builds nicely on Catherine's talk about the use of evidence in government. We're very specifically focused on the use of evaluation evidence. So I understand that this is a friendly audience and that everybody is committed to the use of evidence, but I thought it might be helpful to start with a bit of context about the UK and the context of the kind of evaluation landscape that my team kind of started with. So some analysis in 2009 found that only 8% of spending on the government's most major projects and programmes had a robust evaluation in place. So to put this in context, we spend over £1 trillion a year delivering services for the public. And most of this is funded by taxpayers. So we really have a duty to ensure that every pound of this is delivering the maximum impact. So in relation to these programmes, this means that for over £400 billion worth of spending, we didn't know whether these programmes were doing any good or actually causing harm. So this is around £13,000 for every single household in the UK. And this is also, I think, illustrated by, again, another review in 2021, found that the evaluation of programmes across the UK was very inconsistent. And so when our team was established, only 6 of the major 16 government departments had any form of evaluation strategy in place. Which is where the team that I work in comes in. So we were set up in April 2021. We're around 16 people in total. We are based in the Cabinet Office, but we are jointly sponsored with the Treasury. And our very specific remit is to put evidence at the heart of government decisions and ensure that we're taking an evidence-based approach to decision making. We are experimental by default, which means that we are really pushing for the greater use of experimental evaluations, including RCTs. Whilst recognising these won't be appropriate in all instances, we think that there is a real opportunity that isn't being taken for the greater use of these within government. The central mission of the team is to apply the type of methods and experimentation that we see in medicine, for example, to this £1 trillion of government spending on public services. We often make the case that we'd never consider rolling out a vaccine without this having been rigorously tested, and yet we do this in relation to a whole swathe of other areas of public policy. So in education, in social welfare, in justice. And so we don't truly understand whether the policies, the programmes that we're delivering really are working, and whether we have the right systems in place in order to measure the effectiveness of these. So this is where my team and the work that we do across government comes in. We're really looking to drive for a continuous improvement in the way that programmes are being evaluated, to inform decisions about whether they should be continued, whether they should be modified, so either expanded or adjusted or stopped. The team, as I've said, 16 people, so just keep that in mind in terms of the context here. We have a whole government remit, so we cover all major departments. And we work in a number of different ways. So we provide reactive advice, so in response to departments asking us for support, and also proactive advice and challenge. So where we are aware of areas of particular priority or where we find out through different modes of intelligence gathering that new programs or policies are being developed and there are no evaluation plans in place. And so since inception, April 2021, we've advised on over 380 programs and evaluations covering over £200 billion worth of spend. So how do we go about this work? We do this in a number of different ways, and I think this aligns nicely with the kind of key recipe ingredients that Catherine talked about. So we work very closely with the Treasury, and we support spending teams to ensure that they're making decisions informed by evidence and asking for evaluation plans as part of these. So reviewing business cases for innovation funds and suggesting the inclusion of evaluation conditions in financial settlements. We also work very closely with departments. So, as I've mentioned, we do this kind of encourage. So we help to we review plans, we make suggestions for how they could be improved. We provide expert support both from our team and actually from some other mechanisms that I'll talk about in a moment. And we also offer challenge. As I mentioned, where we scrutinising things and robustly challenging the approaches that are being proposed, where we think the evaluation designs are poor or non-existent. Doing this sometimes with the support of the analysts within those departments. I think often the challenges that are being experienced within a department are we have teams of very keen, very willing analytical teams who would like to do more but are finding barriers, and so sometimes this external scrutiny and interest can be useful, and so we can use it to support those aims. We also are committed to transparency, and I think this comes to some of the questions the question that was being asked about publication. So we are committed to pushing for the greater publication of evaluation evidence and data, and to make sure that this is accessible to the public, but actually also to those internally within government. So to make it easier for policymakers and decision makers to access this work. So some of this is about challenging where we know that evaluations exist. For those to be published, and again, I'll talk about an initiative we have that supports this in a moment. And then the last is around culture change. So the biggest one last, really, and I think this kind of brings together everything that we're trying to do. But a key strand of this work is around using the existing systems and processes within government. So trying to embed requirements for evaluation within these. And so many of these are the financial systems, so through our work with Treasury. And again, this kind of speaks to the point that Catherine was making. It's not about always reinventing the wheel, but making small changes to things so that this really does, this changes the way people work, and it makes it a requirement rather than something people can choose to do. And engaging senior leaders is a very important part of this. We spend a lot of time engaging across government with ministers, with permanent secretaries, with all different kind of layers of officials and others. A lot of this starts with actually having to set out what we mean by evaluation and what the benefits of this could be. As part of this, we also do work around capacity building. So raising awareness and training of people across government. And I'm now just going to go through quite quickly just a few of the ways, the services or kind of initiatives that we have that help to support this. So one of these is our evaluation and trials advice panel. So this is a panel of 65 experts, all who have an understanding of the policy environment and the realities of undertaking evaluations across a wide range of different methodologies. They offer their time totally for free. So this is a free service offered to government departments where they can submit a request for expert support. So this is in addition to the services offered by our team of 16 people. So this greatly expands our capacity and also the breadth and depth of experience. So we will convene a panel in order to respond to the questions being asked by the department, and this can be requested at any point during the evaluation development, often at the design stage, or if there are particular issues that are being experienced. And it can be one-off support, or it can be something that people will go back to. So as I said, this is free to receive for departments, and everybody offers their time totally for free. And we have had an overwhelming interest in joining this panel when we recently refreshed, meaning we have a very high quality of membership. We have also launched something called the Evaluation Registry. So this is the kind of key strand around transparency and the commitment to transparency. So this is a website that brings together all evaluations across government into a single point, so a single repository, making it easier to find evaluations rather than having to look through, to search through each of the individual kind of department repositories. You're able to look across methodologies, across subject areas. Another key point about this, so we established this in 2023, and it became mandatory for all government departments to register new evaluations on this site. So this includes evaluation plans and then ultimately final reports. So we to date have over 1,400 evaluations registered, and this is just increasing. We have plans to make the evaluation registry public from next year. So it will be available for external users to search. So again, making it more accessible outside of government too. Although they won't yet be able to register evaluations on the site. We have established an evaluation academy. So this speaks to the capacity building. So this is capacity building for within government. So this is designed to boost the internal skills and capabilities within departments. So this is an intensive week-long course that is delivered to analysts within government. It's a train-the-trainer model. So we bring analysts with experience of evaluation in to go through these 10 modules across a whole range of different evaluation approaches. They should themselves understand already how to evaluate. This course is designed to teach them how to teach about evaluation. So to go out and to increase the knowledge of specific methodologies and approaches and ensure that we have a kind of a common language and understanding and way in which we're discussing these within government. So we have run 2 rounds of this already. We've trained over 100 civil servants and in turn reached over 1,000 people through the wider training that's been delivered within the departments. And then the kind of last of these kind of activities or initiatives that I'll talk about is the What Works network. So the Evaluation Task Force is the secretariat for this network. And they predate us. They were established in 2013 with the aim of improving the way that government and other public sector organisations create, share and use high quality evidence. So it's made up of 12 What Works centres, and these are independent research organisations which collectively cover policy areas with an over £250 billion worth of public spending. So the network is focused on supporting the drive for more effective and efficient services at both local and national levels across all of these different policy areas. My team support this network by brokering relationships with policymakers in departments, identifying opportunities to use their evidence, research and evaluation services to inform decision making and to ensure that they're having an impact. So the work that they're developing is used effectively. So it's aligned to government priorities, but also then used effectively in decision making. We're also responsible for judging applications to join this network. Each of the centres has a different policy focus. So they range in, we have a centre called the College of Policing that is focused on policing and criminal justice. We have another in relation to education, others focused on children and families. All of them, so they have different thematic focuses, but they work in a similar way. So they are focused on generating evidence, translating evidence, and encouraging evidence adoption amongst practitioners and policymakers. So this is very much ensuring that evidence they don't produce reports that sit in a library bookshelf that just remain within an academic publication and never reach the people that they're intended to. So it's very much about making them accessible. So working with the people that they're intended to influence in terms of the way in which they are translated. So each of the centres have evidence repositories like toolkits that are meant to be very easily accessible. So you can search on a particular area of education that you might want to know what is effective in this place, for example. So collectively, since 2013, centres have delivered more than 500 trials and evaluations across these policy areas. And this evidence has been fed back into the policy cycle, with departments making decisions based on the evidence that they've shared. So I mentioned the College of Policing, for example. They did an evaluation of the effectiveness of police officers wearing body-worn cameras, which led to 22,000 frontline officers in the Metropolitan Police being issued with a body-worn camera. And the example that Catherine's smiling because she did that work, I believe. But the work that Catherine mentioned earlier, also about the social workers in school, was another piece of work delivered by one of the other What Works centres. So again, we have examples of where that work is being used to expand and also to stop a programme that's been shown to be ineffective. So that's my whistle-stop tour through some of the work that we do. There are other areas also that I haven't covered, and I'm happy to talk through the kind of to take questions on any of this. But so kind of just bringing this back to the kind of the key motives that I mentioned, the kind of ambition of the missions of the team at the start, and how these different initiatives and activities relate to delivering these. And I think whilst they each contribute to different parts of these, actually really is a collective. And I think as I said, coming back to the kind of the three pillars or recipe ingredients that Catherine mentioned at the beginning are actually really aligned with the way that we work. So trying to encourage and influence senior support, to build capacity, and to really try and influence the systems and processes. So we are trying to do all three of these things. But I liked the introduction that said that we were still a relatively new team, because it really feels like that. So we are at the start of this journey. I think we've had some successes, also lots of challenges, and we're very reflective about how we work. So I'm keen to hear more about others and the experience here and what we can learn as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we would like to stand out there, and Catherine. So thank you very much, Miriam. And as you can see, Catherine is back on stage as well. So you have a second opportunity to ask questions to both Miriam and Catherine. So just please raise your hands if you have any questions or would like to make a comment. And I can start, of course. I mean, you're just 4 years into this evaluation task force unit, which is a very cool name, I think. I mean, who wouldn't want an evaluation task force? But those What Works networks have been around since 2013, and it seems like you already have a kind of culture of evaluation. What would you think? I mean, how would you rate the sort of British government? You said that you're on the start of a journey, but more generally, how mature are you in having this evaluation mindset?
It's a good question, but it's quite a difficult question to answer, I think. I guess maybe because we are ambitious and also impatient, that we want to do more and we want to go further. I think certainly we can see some progress since, even in the kind of the relatively short time that we've existed, in terms of perhaps the scale of evaluations that are happening, and some particular programs in terms of the kind of the quality there. And maybe just also the recognition, the fact that this perhaps is more part of the kind of common discussion. I think I would say is a change that we've seen over that time. But I think we still feel we have a very long way to go. We do quite a lot. We're very keen to share our experience, and as I've said, to learn from others. So we engage in different international forums like this, and so learn interesting things. Like we've been working with the US. They have quite a different approach in terms of the kind of legislation they have around publication of learning agendas, which set out kind of priorities, evaluation, things like that. We're always trying to consider whether we should be thinking of these different approaches. But I think sometimes it's nice, those comparisons for us, because we can feel, okay, maybe we're slightly further ahead than we think we are, but still very keen to learn and do more.
Would you like to add something?
Sure. So I used to work for a What Works Centre. Good that you found my evaluation somewhere on a website. And I used to be the head of the evaluation task force, and now I'm in a department. So I've sort of seen all three different parts of it. And bizarrely, I was talking to Miriam about it at breakfast. I was like, how evidence-based do you think you would say the UK is? Because how evidence-based do you think Sweden is? And then I was like, oh, this is an interesting comparison. And actually, I think the answer is it's just mixed. Because it depends on the department you're in.
Right.
Depends on the area within the department you're in. And sometimes it just depends on your boss. And it's, I think overall, culture shifts us in a particular direction, but it affects some areas more than others. So when I worked in education, there was a very clear acceptance that you would do trials and you would do things. Less so in justice and policing, because they had slightly different cultures and pressures. So we have 1,000 analysts in Department for Work and Pensions. So I've inherited quite a strong analytical community. But even within that, there were bits that we don't do as well as we could. So I think that the answer, unfortunately, is it's very mixed, and it depends where you are and who you ask and what exactly they're working on.
Right, and I hope that we will come back to that. But just from your experience within the UK, are there any policy areas? I mean, you mentioned policing and justice. Yeah. Are there any other that are sort of dark corners?
You want our dirty soldier. Who else would I say is doing what they should? I'd love less sectors. I'd love more situations to get better. So where we have to give a very immediate response to something, we're less good. So there's a particular crisis or issue that people want an answer very quickly to. I think that we are often very drawn to making a choice. Often you have to, but whether we give enough time to those, I would. Say the only other ones I would probably think about is whether we invest enough. So again, I was talking to you just at the beginning of the session. Probably the best answer is I wish we'd started that 10 years ago and thought about it, whether we're doing enough of that now to help our future selves. And I'm not sure we're doing enough cross-departmental stuff that invests in finding answers longer term. Quite a lot of our trials, quite a lot of our evaluations are very short term. And because of the political cycle. So probably the future me, when I'm the head of the civil service, is going to really thank me for the stuff that I'm going to do now in 10 years' time.
So we have a question over here.
Thank you and good morning. Jan Garton, the Swedish Agency for Defense Analysis, and I apologize for asking two very self-centered questions and coming back to potentially undeveloped or dark sectors. My questions are you aware of interest or applications in terms of what works evaluation in the fields of national security and defense policy? And my second question, you touched on international cooperation. Have you branched out, or are you considering branching out in terms of your centers at the national level in establishing international what works cooperation, sharing best practice? Thank you.
Thank you. So we talked about defense when we
national security. Now that's an interesting one. So I am aware that the UK government does try to do evaluations into national security, and then I'm also very aware that we don't publish any of the results or share them with anybody because of national security. So I think that probably we need to get those people all in a room together who will have the same security clearance to be able to effectively share that. I'd love us to do. There are things that we could do openly that we probably still don't. But yes, for national security in particular, yes, I am aware. And if you want to, I can put you in touch with. I mean, Miriam equally can put you in touch with people on the what work stuff. Selfishly, anything to do with labour markets or anything to do with getting people back to work, very open to engaging. We have lots of funding. We're going to do lots of trialling. Now I'm the head of the chief analyst there. We're going to do lots of trialling, but you can never do enough. And actually, if more countries are involved, we can learn faster and we can learn different approaches quicker. And if I'm doing approach A and you're doing approach B, great. If we're doing it simultaneously, we've learned twice as much in the same time period. So very open to that, but that's not your area. Miriam?
So the what work centres themselves do pursue some international kind of links. It depends, the maturity of that depends on the centre. So the Education Endowment Foundation, for example, is very well established. They have very good international network. We are very keen to explore that international collaboration and reach, because we believe that many of the issues we're grappling with are not unique to us, and have been doing some work in this area. Actually, we established a kind of small collaboration with counterparts from the US, Australia and Canada to explore opportunities for greater collective kind of generation and synthesis of evidence and sharing of practice, and commissioned an organisation to do a bit of scoping work around this, which was published quite recently, which I could share with you. But we're always interested in hearing from others and thinking about how we could expand this. And the plan was to start small and think about how we could build that. But also we participate in OECD discussions and kind of sharing of practice and things like that. But I'd be very keen to talk more afterwards. And I think that there are, as Catherine said, in relation to national security specifically, I think there are some international groups, because it's quite a difficult area to do publicly. But I think there are kind of some closed groups that do sharing on that.
So we have one question here and then one question over here okay. So let's start, please.
Okay, Anders Forslund again. Okay. So I got really interested in this database on both plans for evaluations and results from evaluations. And I also know that Danish colleagues have collected evidence, research evidence on impacts of active labor market policies. And I think this would be a really good place for international cooperation, actually, to collect evidence in the form of a database, including both kind of ongoing stuff and results of published journal articles or internal working papers of your departments or whatever, because finding evidence from other countries is really hard unless it's published in international journals, basically. I know, because I've been trying to do reviews. And also, I agree with you on this kind of, it's very different between different policy areas, also in Sweden. In my institute, we do research both on active labor market policies and educational policies.
Mm-hmm.
And our experience is that it's easier to convince authorities within the labor market policy area than in the educational area for us in Sweden, actually.
Wow.
Thank you. So we will get back to this also, and let's take the other question as well now.
Yes. Is this on? Yeah. I'm Helena Holmlund. I'm from the Swedish National Audit Office, and I have a question. So do you feel that you are always supported by academia in your quest for more evidence-based policy decision-making? So the reason I'm asking is kind of linked to Anders's comment on education. There are some academic disciplines where at least some scholars, they're used to a different research tradition. They don't necessarily agree with the idea of measuring outcomes quantitatively. They use more qualitative methods and so on. And how do you deal with that? Do you encounter this kind of conflict sometimes?
Great question. So.
Shall I go? Yeah, sure. Yes, I've had all of the above. So I've tried creating some academic roundtables on productivity, and the academics like, we do not agree with your definition, so we will not take part. Thank you for coming. This is very awkward. Or I get sometimes, you're a lovely audience, but sometimes I get called about approaches the department's taken, or that people tell me I'm some sort of like methods purist and that I possibly can't do that. It's just wild. These people get very, very angry about like choices, very small choices that we've made in some it's incredible. I would say that they're probably the minority, though, of people, and the majority of academics, when you come across them, seem very willing to, although I did quite recently have a conversation where the only answer where we managed to get the Secretary of State in the room with them was, well, you should read my reports. But what do you recommend? Well, you should read my reports. Is that they do want to help. They do want to engage, but I just don't think that they're close enough to the policy reality to be able to shape their messages effectively enough. So sometimes their suggestions are just a smidge too theoretical. And it's very hard to see how that translates. So sometimes I see my job almost as a translator between them, where they're saying something and their evidence is available, and just trying to help them say, okay, so what practically would you suggest? Or here are the options. Which ones of those do you think are going to have the least worst or the best outcome? And sometimes helping people take the step to, even if it's not perfect, knowing something is better than nothing, having to make a choice without any evidence because you aren't engaging because the definition doesn't match or the quality of whatever it is. We have to get over that. And sometimes we have to just make a choice on what is available, and helping them have the confidence and the sort of feeling of security that they can engage even in those environments where not a lot is known. And that's the trick, I think, with that.
That resonates very much with how we work here at SNS and when we interact with researchers. I would now like to welcome up on stage our two panelists who will join us. Shirin Ahlbeck-Öberg, who is Professor of Political Science at Uppsala University, and Jesper Ahlgren, State Secretary to the Minister of Finance with responsibility for budget issues. And I would like to start with you, Shirin, to give an introductory remark of what you've heard. And also with the more pointed questions, are there any, maybe a bit rhetorical, but are there trade-offs or potential conflicts between basing policy development and implementation on ideology, values, versus research, evidence, and expert knowledge?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and it's been very interesting listening to you, Miriam and Catherine. I find the topic of this seminar important and very interesting. And let me, first of all, who can be against evidence-based policy? I mean, at face value, it's hard to object to the very idea. And it seems only reasonable that policy should be informed and evaluated. However, I see my task here as to problematize the picture a bit, at least to point out the possible pitfalls here. that can be seen from a democratic theory point of view, following the question from Ilinka. I would say that the relationship between politics and expert knowledge is quite complex. Sometimes politicians involve policy analysts because they want to find out the best solution to a policy problem, but other times they just want to find arguments for a position already taken. This is discouraging. If we want politics to take the form of enlightened understanding, it is not acceptable that relevant information is totally ignored. In that case, policy analysis and evaluations might just be a play to the gallery or an empty ritual. On the other hand, we don't want politicians to be like puppets on a string for experts. Results from evaluations or scientific committees or other policy analysis should not be uncritically accepted by politicians. If so, we risk a situation where politics moves from democratic arenas to closed offices of consultants and experts. So from a normative point of view, I would like to have decision makers to critically reflect on relevant information and be able to argue why they dismiss some information and make use of other. So this should be clearly expressed, okay? They should not just dodge the information. But this is not easy, and there is a lot of unknown here. There is a need for better instruments, I would say, for analysis of the problem and more empirical knowledge on how and when politicians navigate between what I call knowledge nonchalance, kunskapsnonchalans, and technocracy. I mean, in democratic theory, technocracy is often what is warned about. But I also think there is a second ditch, how to navigate. So from my point of view, the usage of expert knowledge can pose at least two quite different threats to core democratic values. So evaluations can become empty rituals that defeat their own purpose and leave room for what I would call knowledge nonchalance. But they can also lead to open discussions based on political values being abandoned in favor of what can be described as expert rule technocracy. So this is, I mean, what I'm talking about here is the receiving capacity from the political sphere. But I also think, and that can be for a later discussion, we can also discuss evaluations from a more supply side. So what does this do to the public service? What is required from them in terms of self-reporting, administrative burdens, who decides what work well performed is? I mean, the criteria for the evaluation and such things. I think that can also be discussed. Yes.
Thank you very much, Shireen. And I will, I'm really looking forward to hearing your response to this, but I would like to also bring in Jesper Ahlgren into the discussion. So, and hear your introductory remarks from what you've heard from Catherine and Miriam, and also give the sort of Swedish context. So which main tools do your government apply to ensure that you understand the impact of your interventions in order to, as Miriam put it, make decisions about stopping, continuing, and expanding or modifying programs?
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting topic. And I assume that I represent one of the challenges to policy-based evaluations in the fifth one, I think. So it's not the main one.
No, you're not in my top three.
Good to hear. To say that, of course, just to reassure you that I think for politicians, I mean, all fact-based and policy evaluations are very, very useful, especially for good politicians. They know that it's very useful to use that and have that and to back it up. And it's both in the public debate and in the negotiations that we have in the department between departments and between parties. It's that, of course, it's you always want the whole picture and the arguments there's been some nonchalance. I don't know. There might be as well, but it's the starting point is at least to get to know all the facts there. What you then of course it's there is of course a question why you don't always use it. I mean, a lot of you are experts in your fields, and you know the facts, and you see why are they doing this when they shouldn't, or with the fact speaking for another conclusion. And there, I think there are several reasons for that. One is of course that in many cases you don't know, you don't have the full picture. It hasn't been done before, the policy proposal you're doing, or at least it hasn't been done in Sweden. It's been done in another country, and it might work the same way, but it won't. Maybe won't, because we have different systems. So you always have to make an assessment if the knowledge is relevant or not. Then of course it's, as we discussed just a little bit beforehand, if it's not clear what's the main topic or the purpose of a reform is always. We'll have some effect, but that might not be the most important one. For example, we made a tax cut in this budget. We cut the top rate of income tax. And then because it's very clear, we had a good report from EFA, which said that it was, when it was risen 8 years before, it didn't bring in any money, because the ones affected, they worked less, so they didn't get any money at all. So it was very clear cut for using evidence that we should abolish it. But of course that was the one that we mostly criticized. When we presented the budget, that was the only one the journalists cared about. And of course, you could say that it's because they don't care about the evidence, but that's not really fair, because policy proposals have different effects, and of course another effect is when we cut the tax for the higher income, we make them richer, and the income inequality is larger. That's an effect, and if you perceive that is more important than the growth effects, then of course it's perfectly legitimate to criticize it, even though we had a very good report, and all the evidence pointed to that you'd abolish it. So you should always, it's important to understand why why reform is made. Then of course it's also of course the amount. You don't always have the time to look at all the evidence. I think for the last budget we had 1,400 reform proposals. That's the different departments wanted to implement, and I don't know the research behind every one of them, but there is this for the big ones. Of course, they're quite normally you do quite a lot of work to understand if it's good policy or not. And of course, maybe most important is that we can take away those that won't work. That's maybe some sort of baseline, that we at least not implement things that we know won't work. That's we should start there at least. To say something about the difference between English, Britain and Sweden, maybe also because we're much more decentralized, and much of the evaluation is done in independent agencies. As I won't have to tell this audience that, I suppose. Many of you work there, and you have there's some benefits and some troubles with that, of course. The problem is that it's more difficult for me to talk to the author of the report, or who made it. You have to get a little bit further away from the actual knowledge as to pass to the servers and so on. On the other hand, I think you get a more of a broader view of it. You have you can get a broader picture, and you also get it's more independent, and it's out there in the debate. If we want to, you can't avoid it. If there is report from an agency, then the opposition will find it, the media will find it, and you have to answer it. You can't dodge it. So I think that's probably for us at least. I think that's a better way to have it, and that's all. We've also been increasing the number of those kind of agencies for the last 20 years. We're at the moment we're looking into to make them more effective. We, as many of you know, we're gonna merge Statssekretare and ESV, for example, to get more powerful evaluation agencies, and we are also having an inquiry now. It's looking into the other evaluation agencies that we can group them to make them more effective, and because some of them are quite small and could use have more power, more manpower, more to collect the knowledge.
So thank you. So Miriam and then Catherine, what are your sort of reflections first on Shirin on this the sort of ditches that you might fall into with knowledge, ignorance or nonchalance, and on the other hand, expert rule, as well as also this interesting, which has been a sort of a big debate in Sweden about the burden, administrative burden put on the people providing these services in order to document what they're doing and reporting back and so on.
Okay, so I've worked in government for quite a long time across quite a lot of different agencies and departments, and I guess the experience that I would draw on there, like I know the realities of the way in which decisions are made. I don't think that we are in, I think the push that we are making is to try and make evidence part of the decision-making process and a more important part of that, and to try and kind of standardize that. I see the kind of challenge that you're making in terms of the role of experts and how they are positioned, and risks around that. Who are these experts? And evidence is, there isn't a single evidence, there isn't a single answer to things. I accept all of that, and that politicians and our kind of democratically elected politicians have a role in deciding the approaches they want to take. I don't think that the use of evidence and evaluation challenges that. I think that there is, again, it's just one part of this process, that they are absolutely able to make a decision, an ideological decision, and this is very routinely what happens, but they should make that based on the best available information. And so in the knowledge that actually if they want to make an ideological decision that goes counter to the evidence, that's what they're doing, or an area in which there isn't. Again, I think this perhaps comes to your point. I don't think that evidence and the lack of evidence shouldn't thwart innovation or trying new approaches, but actually you can do things to then build that. So if you are trying something new, we should be trying to do that in a way that we're then understanding if it is working in the way that we expect it to, it's having those ideologically desired outcomes, but we're measuring that. Otherwise, how do we know? How do we? So I don't necessarily see it as, or maybe it's just because of, if we were in a situation where we were talking about only making decisions based on evidence, and then what constitutes the evidence that we're considering. But I just don't think that's the reality of where we are.
Yeah, and Catherine, what about? I mean, both on Shirin, but also Jesper Ahlgren, the sort of reality of policymaking, and what are your experiences from the British government, and also your reflections listening to how it works in Sweden from Jesper's point of view?
So, I mean, I think he's totally right that ultimately you can't make a decision purely on the evidence, because essentially you are not going to do what people want. The most clear example of that is injustice. So if you look at the evidence, sending people to prison, particularly short sentences for us, just increases their likelihood that they're going to commit another offence. And after a particular number of years, to be honest, an added year is making absolutely no difference to the chance that they're going to commit more offences or not. It just costs the state money to keep them housed. Equally, you have lots of victims of crime. You have lots of people who would be devastated if they had been the victim of a crime and they saw no punishment for that offence. And so there are things that government does as a government that is different than just following evidence and delivering the best possible outcome for the whole population. Instead, sometimes it has to do things that actually are what society wants us to do. Equally, I don't know, for some people, it's probably a British culture thing, right? But for some of us, the thought that undeserving people get benefits, or new people, new entrants come to the country and take, like, there's a whole host actually of cultural and context factors that you should consider about, I don't know, immigration and health and justice and social society. So I completely agree. You can't make those things in isolation, because actually there are very clear trade-offs. The worst evaluations I think I ever see are things where you are evaluating something that's going to happen anyway. It doesn't matter. The evaluation is sort of a sideshow. There's nothing there, that the program is just going to be rolled out. I think that you should only really evaluate, and this makes it then proportionate and useful, if you're going to use the results, if it will genuinely inform something, right? If you are genuinely open to changing the way that rolls out in some way, or stopping it if it doesn't work. And the main problem is, once you roll a program or a policy out, no matter how bad it is, people don't like it taken away. Like, they don't like a tax change, because if you'd have never done it in the first place, they wouldn't be harassing you to introduce it. But at the moment you introduce something, the idea to take it away, no matter how bad it is, people can't lose it. They're like, what do you mean?
This is only temporarily, but it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. So I can tell you, I don't know, probably, I haven't done the evaluation, but we give free travel to all old people in the UK. I can tell you that's probably really bad value for money. Terrible. They're not working. They're not using that to work. They're using that for like day trips out. They're not, and actually they have got more disposable income than lots of working age people. Could you take that away? No chance. Like, you would. The cost of that is disproportionate to the cost of the policy continuing. So yeah, there are lots of things that we do that make no logical sense, but as a society we want to do them. As a society we choose to do them, and that's okay.
I would like to open the floor for questions and comments, so please raise your hand if you and wait for a microphone.
Ja, tack. Per Törnvall, Sollentuna Municipality. We heard from UK the value of pilots before going full scale. To the Swedish participants, we often go full scale at once in Sweden. I think independent schools, freedom of choice. What are your thoughts about increasing the use of pilots in Sweden before going full scale?
Yes, sure. Both, I think both Jesper and Shilin.
It's a good question. I think in some ways that it can be difficult. I hear sometimes that we should have made some tax cuts for half of the population and not the other half, to see what the effect was. And it's of course that's and you have a lot of those examples. If you have something good, you should give it to everybody. So it's a sign of that you don't believe in it, and that's it's a bit of a sign of weakness to just do it in small scale first. But of course you're right. We should do that more. Especially, I think we should use the fact that we have 290 municipalities and try to implement some measures in some of the municipalities and not in others.
Jesper, are you doing this in any particular area at the moment?
We had an inquiry which had that as that suggested that. I don't think that it wasn't. The result there, I don't think.
Okay, I take that as a no.
No, that's a no. Of course we do that, but it's not that.
I think that's a very good question. I think your example is very good too. If you look at the government bills suggesting the municipalization of the school system in the early 90s and also the free school reform, they're very, very thin. No preparatory work. It was very little evidence-based or evidence-informed reform. and we're living with that today. Yes.
Do you have any examples from UK where, because I guess this is a problem also in the UK, where you have sort of given advice to a government to stagger, I mean, the introduction of a program?
Yeah, so I mean, an example in my own department, the availability of free childcare. So exactly, like, would you only give that to half the population? Like, you can't. That's going to cause a real issue if women in some places can, or men can apply for those benefits and others can't. So you're right. And actually, my top tip for this is to start with the boring first. Start with really inane things that no one cares about. Because no one will mind. So in many cases, I can remember we have a huge backlog of asylum applications to process. Now, there is no way that we can start doing a trial with asylum about letting people in or not, but you can tackle bureaucracy. How can we speed up the processing of it? And that is a really boring but efficient and nice way of introducing evidence into an area that we don't really do a lot of evidence-based approaches. And that's been my trick with a lot of this. Again, with benefits I can't touch, but I can touch things like the frequency, the type of contact they have, what do we do with them when we speak to them, what's the engagement? Those things, they're not politically sensitive. No one will get upset if you, I don't know, somebody asked you about your day and tried to use your first name in the first contact compared to somebody else. And that's us trying to build a bond to get someone interested, to make a connection between a work coach and a job seeker. And nobody is going to write to you angrily because I chose a different method of bureaucracy to process the application. But I can save you time and money, right? And I can save you process. I can get those people in that department to think more evidence about, oh, I see, actually, that thing we tried isn't that effective. Or, oh, actually. And once you get people curious, that's what helps. And you slowly build a culture, you build a change. So start with the boring, start with nothing anybody cares about, and you build up evidence and you build up learning, and you then create an approach that people feel safer doing.
That's a good advice. So we have a question over here.
Yes, you already answered the question. I'm from the Swedish Authority for Growth Policy Analysis. But for us to be able to do it, we need the politics and also authorities that do the implementation to actually make implementation in a way that makes it possible to do the evaluation, and also documentation. Don't throw it away, basically. And I think you talked about it almost, but what we often have as a hurdle is the lack of documentation or implementation, proactive implementation. And the responsibility is to large extent on authorities. So what's your experience from Britain or England?
Miriam.
Sure. So I think I would reiterate some of the points that Catherine made. I think that kind of the starting small is useful. I think there's also the ideas about how you can test different things. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Like, what is it that you're looking at, and can you try to kind of build agreement there? I think we face a lot of the same issues, like that idea around implementation and getting in at the right point in terms of being able to give you the room to be able to design these evaluations. I don't know that there's an easy route to this. I think it takes a lot of work. I think it takes a lot of engagement at all of the different. So there is an important thing about the kind of senior level support, but actually I also think at the opposite end of that, it's also about those people that are operationally delivering this. And there's something very, very valuable about having examples. So maybe this kind of speaks to the doing something that's easy and or starting somewhere that's easy, but being able to have an example to say, look, we were able to do this. So for us, one of the areas I work in is justice. And so being able to have examples to say, you know, yes, it's really difficult to run a trial within a prison, but you know what, we've done this. And you have this example, and you're able also to link to the prison officers that were receptive, the governors that enabled that access. And so kind of speaking, I think that peer learning and sharing is really, really important. And again, that's one of the kind of valuable things with this What Works network I was talking about. They run a lot of these trials. They have these stakeholder groups. And that is just really, really important, recognizing the realities for the people on the ground, and how I think one of the really big challenges we often get is around the kind of the question of ethics. Like because I think the reason that many people don't evaluate is not so much always because they're afraid, as you said, but actually they believe. I think it's, more positive ideologically. I think what I'm doing is good. I know it is. We've been doing this forever. And so like you're questioning that, and you're saying, well, actually, we're not going to, this thing is good and we're going to withhold it. And our kind of counter to that is actually, we don't know that it is. We don't know that this really is having the impact that you think it could, but also something else could be better. But so trying to, I guess it's that kind of trying to use the examples of where this has worked and allay some of those fears.
Thank you, Shirin. And please stand close to your microphone.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say something about context here. I would say that in Sweden, we have a system where all political goals are prioritized at the same time. And it means that public service, government agencies, and so on, they need to have systematic work processes. They need to have action plans. They need to have documentations that a supervisory agency can check. And the problem here over I would say the last 10, 15 years is that this kind of legislation has escalated. And that's when we come to the problem of administrative burden, because this has a tendency to crowding out the core activities of the agency. So a big question for me here is that if you're going to add more evaluation, what are you going to take away? Because this is also value for money, where you put your effort.
Catherine, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I also think data and evidence is quite addictive. The more you know, the more you want to know, the more detail and the more areas, the more variation. At some point, it's not value for money anymore. You just stop. Like, yes, you just should stop. And so, yeah, I suppose at some point, either someone like Jesper stops us and says, we're not spending any more money on it, or I say, I don't have analysts to put on it. But you're right. You need to really think about the sort of three fundamental things in a policy that require an evaluation. Is it very, very high cost? And so at some point, someone's going to ask you why you spent all that money. Is it particularly novel and contentious, so it's controversial and people will want to know that the right thing happened? Or is it just actually that it's really innovative, and so you should, for the sake of learning, understand about this particularly interesting concept, that there's a very interesting opportunity to get that learning transferred. If you're just routinely doing something, we've done this many times before, we already know it works, there's no particular learning in it, stop. Do not evaluate. No one's going to read your report. No one's learning from it. You're wasting expert time on something that could be used much more sensibly. That is a problem when you do take my advice and you change a system, because if it pushes evaluation into everything, it becomes almost meaning you clog up the system, having to wait for all sorts of things you want to do.
I would like to pose a question on a bit more general level, coming back to what you said on sort of creating this evaluation culture and system, and it has to do with a common perception of what is good, what is evaluation first, because I think we use it in very different ways, or we mean different things by it, or we fill it with different things, and also what is good evaluation, and how do you work in order to get this common perception of evaluation, and also which are the good methods for evaluating something? And of course, there might be the counter argument that this is in this profession or in this area, some methods just don't apply. So how liberal should you be in accepting those kind of arguments? And also coming to the Swedish system, where we have independent agencies performing evaluations, which are sort of far away from central government, but also a bit more far away from the the agencies that actually do the work. So, and I just guess that there are rather different culture within, and different knowledge bases within these different agencies. And I mean, how can Jesper know that an evaluation in one agency means the same thing as an evaluation in another agency? So I would just like you to reflect on that, and maybe we will start here and then go to the Swedish. So Miriam, how do you work with them?
Yes, so I think it's definitely a challenge that we face. And so I mentioned we spend quite a lot of our time doing offering to run workshops and teach-ins, and so kind of working through it and pitching that at different levels. So depending on who we're talking to, starting with what we mean by evaluation. And often we're trying to do this a little bit covertly as well, because if we're invited to talk to a minister, we're not supposed to be telling them that they don't know what evaluation is. So kind of trying to explain that in a way that we will use examples of things to talk about what is good evaluation versus what wouldn't really, you know, be considered.
How open can you be about that? I mean, how blunt can you be?
Not very blunt, I would. I don't know. I think it's trying to, it depends on the audience, and it can shift, right? We have different relationships with different people are more interested, but it's trying to tailor it to those interests. So we've had, you know, we're in a difficult fiscal climate, and so kind of positioning things in relation to efficiency and cost saving. And so this example Catherine talked about with the social workers in schools, people love this, right? Because it's an example of, normally when you're talking about evaluation, it's scale up and like, this is the idea that it's going to cost us more money. So actually being able to say that, you know, that's not always the case. So I think we find examples very, very useful, these very kind of tangible idea of also things that play on, you know, this idea that we do know, you know what's effective. Putting a social work, you know, offering this greater support in schools is just, you know, intrinsically it's a good thing, right? It's going to make things better. But actually that's what we need to challenge. So using those type of very kind of worked examples, I think, rather than the theory is useful. And there is also a question of, yes, when we're talking about evaluation, we are prioritizing counterfactual evaluations. That's what we want to see more of. Recognizing that different contexts are going to require different types of approaches, and not saying that there isn't a place for other forms of evaluation, and it will be. So you need to look at that and provide advice in relation to the context specific. But actually, when you've got limited time and you're talking about improving at a broad scale, that's what we're looking to push for.
Jesper.
Yeah, I think that's good. A good evaluation is, if it's very clear. I want to know if it works or not, or what we should do to improve it. It's and I think maybe some of the evaluations that I read are maybe a little bit too cautious. You should the more specific, the more concrete, the more because it's. In order to help the decision making, that's better. Only to state that we should have a comprehensive approach and look at all the evidence. It's I know that, but it's not that. Yeah, you can't use it that much. So the more specific, the more concrete, and the more I think the Ministry of Finance, at least, we want that the officials to the people, the experts, to say, what do you think? Do you think given the available evidence, whatever that might be, we should do this? And then they might you don't know, you can't know for sure, but it's given the evidence that this is probably the best way to go about. And so the more you can be, the better.
Shreem, would you like to, but the sort of jungle of different kind of evaluations that I think are taking place in Sweden as we speak, is the quality sort of the same, or?
No, you're absolutely right. It's quite diverse, I would say, and it's all from very excellent evaluations based on transparent data and so on, to more of a tick box evaluation. That the supervisory agency will check that the documentation is there, but not do an in-depth qualitative assessment. So there's a wide range here. And if I may say something about, I think when I say that the request through legislation and also through appropriation directives from government of different colors to agencies to do more of action plans, documentations, and so on, that this has increased during the last decade or 15 years. I would say it's very much an effect of contract parliamentarism. We have minority governments and they divide the different ministries between them, and it's important to show that you're actually doing something. So you go with the legislation, you have a press conference and so on, and there is not a real, I would say from the government offices, a helicopter perspective on what's actually each and every government agency need to do. So I'm all for the evaluation, but I would love to have some more of prioritizing, not prioritizing all goals at the same time.
So this is a hint to you, Jesper.
Yes. I know, and of course we have the goals are not equally important, but maybe in when we communicate, you have to tell everyone that they're important. You can't tell it.
Of course.
Which agency should I tell that are not important here? I don't know.
I see the problem, and I would say it's not only the direct control from the government, it's also via the supervisory agencies who take their mission seriously, which they, I mean, of course should, but
you're onto something, of course. It's and I think it's a bit of a. I'm an economist, so I believe that the lawyers are a bit of a trouble. You can have different opinions on that.
Closer to your microphone.
Sorry, but it's
to let another question from the audience in as well.
Thank you very much. I'm from the National Board of Trade, which is the Swedish government's agency on international trade, EU trade policy, EU internal market and trade policy. I have a question which is slightly broader, and I would agree on the lawyers, but that's another story. We have an important task in trying to make sure that we make trade policy evidence-based again. Not easy. We have soon an American president that feels that tariffs is the most beautiful word in the English language. Comparative advantages, gains, productivity gains from trade and imports, intuitively to understand. So it's not an easy. We heard that we should start with the boring stuff, but when you don't have that option, when you a problem that is very important and still there is a need for evidence-based policy, advise to us, how do you kind of approach the public? Because in the US, we see that this gains traction, does in Europe as well. Non-evidence-based trade policy is it's the bulk of the trade policy today. How do we address the public opinion in terms of giving it a better basis for understanding what is evidence-based policy in an area like this? It would be interesting to hear your comments on that.
Sure. Yes. Do you know, I had actually written public down because that was going to be my next point, because I've got two interesting examples of that. One, I think, is the proliferation of the use of AI and the public's acceptance of the use of their data in particular ways, and their willingness basically to engage with machine learning or with essentially generated interactions rather than humans, and whether we are genuinely getting people's consent to do those things. So, and the other one was the choice of methods that people use. You actually joke about the tax. There's a police force in the UK that decided whether to investigate burglaries based on house number. That was incredibly unpopular. Perfect trial, really, really good trial. Because actually, technically, after a burglary has happened, the chances of you being able to solve it is quite low, and you're not getting anything from the house visit. But the public hated it, like really hated it. And it was, it's quite a scandal. I think they had to stop halfway through. I mean, it's sad because that would have been some very interesting findings. But the learning from that, of course, is the method you choose and the amount you engage the public in what you're doing and how you are framing what you do. So that the lesson from that is that essentially people don't like to feel that they're losing out, that there's some injustice, that something isn't logical or right. You can't blind people with science because they don't want to know or can't know, and that's not for them to have the appropriate understanding. So it depends on the level of trust your department already has. So whether the public already think that the things that you do, that they can trust you to make the right choices. Because if you're in a low trust environment, then whatever you do, people will be skeptical about, and you have to go an extra step to do reassurance. It depends on the methods that you take. With trade, I mean, you're the international trade expert here, Miriam. But with trade, it's quite hard, I suspect, to, and the final job I did for the Foreign Office before I left was how do you measure the impact of British influence post-Brexit? And that was basically impossible to measure and depressing if you wanted to. So there are methods that you can take, but it depends on how engaged the public already is, how sensitive the topic you'll take, and the options you've got to deal with it, because there is never a black and white answer to how you would get that. By the way, I know you hate lawyers. I hate procurement.
Okay, so that's a topic for more discussion. I want to have to let one last question in from the audience before the break. So please.
Hi, my name is Livia Holm, and I work in health tech and innovation in the healthcare sector. And I'd like to challenge what's been said about the fact that we in Sweden don't pilot different policies, because we have quite a unique setup in the sense that we have politically governed regions and municipalities. And we do have quite diverse policies in our regions and municipalities, but we don't evaluate them very much. We don't share learnings. So how can we, so my question to you, how do you think we in Sweden could be better at national level to utilize the fact that we have these diverse policies across the country? And what do you in the UK think we should be doing with it? If you had the opportunity, how would you make use of that in a good way?
Thank you. So we'll start with the Swedish side. Jesper, would you like to start?
It is a very good question, and we'll battle with that question quite a lot, actually. As you know, we send quite a lot of money to the municipalities and each year, and I think the key is to use those money. I think 170 billion crowns a year or something like that. We send. I think that should come with some strings, but exactly how we should do it, it's a bit difficult, of course, and then they're independent as well, so it's not that easy to tell them what to do. But I mean, this government we're working for more of a centralized way to use it, and then that would be one part of it, to see and compare the efficiency in different municipalities, for example, but it's a sensitive issue that we haven't cracked it yet.
Shireen, would you like to comment?
No, I only think that sounds like a really good idea. I'm so old that when I started to study political science, we were taught at the university a lot about kommunförsök. That was a term which is not used that much today. And actually, kommunförsök, that's municipal trials. And what they would do, that I remember now, is test boring things, like the organization of the municipality, to try a new type of organization that was not in line with the municipal law and stuff like that.
So Miriam, what would you do if you had this broad arena of potential test beds? Like we have 290 municipalities and 21 regions for healthcare. And
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds great. But of course, it's not that straightforward. I guess, how closely do you work with each other? What is the opportunity to kind of to collaborate across those, to think about kind of similar areas and where you could be testing something in one place before it starts to be kind of rolled out into another? You know, I don't know enough about the landscape, but I think that there sound like definitely like there's lots of kind of opportunities there that could be capitalized on.
I think maybe we could go back to your point about culture and senior support. Because it's not easy to govern these municipalities and regions. And now I have already taken a bit of the break, but I think that we can have 15 minutes of break because we need it. And I really want you to use the time to talk to Catherine and Miriam, who are here now, and continue to share, ask questions and share knowledge. So thank you very much for this panel. Välkomna tillbaka allesammans. Jag hoppas att ni har haft möjlighet att pigga upp er lite med kaffe och bulle och även lite paussamtal. Som ni hör så kommer vi fortsätta samtalet på svenska. Men Catherine och Miriam är tillbaka här på lunchen om ni vill prata mer med dem. Det kändes som att det fanns en stor efterfrågan på det, vilket är jätteroligt. Så nu vill jag då välkomna panelen, vår andra panel, och det är Helena Lindberg, Anders Forslund och Tommy Andersson. Och jag tänkte börja med dig, Helena. Du har ju nyligen slutat som riksrevisor och även en lång erfarenhet i staten, bland annat som generaldirektör för MSB. Och så är du ny också ordförande för Skatteverket. Så utifrån det som Miriam och Catherine berättade, också det som vi har pratat om tidigare, så här, hur väl riggad skulle du säga att statsförvaltningen är då för att följa upp hur skattemedel används?
Ja. Tack Linka, och tack för inbjudan, och vilken intressant diskussion vi hade här på förmiddagen. Jag vågar ju knappt säga det, jag är jurist.
Precis, det var
ju väldigt många som hade en aversion mot jurister, men jag tänker att juridiken är ändå faktiskt till vår hjälp, och då tänker jag att jag tar avstamp i vår regeringsform. Vår grundlag helt enkelt, och det gör ju oss, tycker jag, väl rustade i Sverige att faktiskt följa upp, utvärdera, se till att vi får bästa möjliga effekt av våra gemensamma resurser, våra skattepengar. Jag tänker inte börja med att tala om Riksrevisionen och Riksrevisionens roll i det här. Det är klart att den myndigheten har en viktig roll, men framförallt är det kanske hela vårt system, vår unika förvaltningsmodell med de krav som regeringsformen ställer på oss som verkar i systemet att agera enligt första kapitlet, 9:e paragrafen. Saklighet, objektivitet och legalitetsprincipen som är viktig. Jag tänker kanske understryka sakligheten. För det gör ju att vår förvaltning befolkas av väldigt många kunniga, duktiga experter, ofta med forskarutbildning, många forskningsmyndigheter, inte bara analysmyndigheter utan faktiskt forskningsinstitut. Jag har en bakgrund i, som du var inne då, på MSB och Försvarsdepartementet, försvarsfrågor. Jag vill kanske särskilt att lyfta fram Totalförsvarets forskningsinstitut som är en väldigt spännande myndighet, och apropå då diskussionen om hur kan man utvärdera vad som händer inom försvarsområdet. Där finns, och det var vi inne på också på förmiddagen, det finns en kultur av att faktiskt vilja stödja sig på forskningsresultat, vetenskap. Och sen saknade jag lite kanske diskussionen om beprövad erfarenhet. Jag frågade runt lite här, hur säger man beprövad erfarenhet på engelska? Och jag hade lite olika bud, men best practice tror jag är den bästa översättningen. Och det är vi också vana vid, och vi har hört talas om inspektionsmyndigheter, tillsynsmyndigheter eller myndigheter som ska stötta regioner, kommuner att fatta bra beslut utifrån kunskapsstyrning. Är ju ett begrepp som vi använder. Så egentligen ska jag säga att vi har ett bra förutsättningar, goda förutsättningar. Men det bygger ju på att policymakarna då använder sig utav den här kunskapen och kompetensen, tar till sig och använder den i sitt beslutsfattande. Jag stannar där så kommer vi tillbaka.
Jag ska säga också, det borde jag sagt inledningsvis, men Anneli Rosvall Ljunggren som också skulle varit här som generaldirektör för Statskontoret, hon är tyvärr sjuk. Men förhoppningsvis får vi tillfälle att träffa henne vid något annat tillfälle. Men Anders Forslund, du är ju då representant här i alla fall idag då för just ett sånt statligt forskningsinstitut. Institutet för arbetsmarknad och utbildnings... men gud. IFA. Helt enkelt. Institutet för arbetsmarknad och utbildningspolitisk utvärdering. Ja. Precis. Och ni forskar ju om såväl arbetsmarknadsfrågor, utbildningsfrågor, socialförsäkringsfrågor och har också den här särskilda kompetensen som att göra liksom, kvantitativa studier, effektstudier baserade på registerdata som jag misstänker är efterfrågan och avundsvärd. Hur skulle du säga, hur relaterar liksom det som Catherine och Miriam beskrev till av hur de arbetar i Storbritannien med dina erfarenheter av IFA och att jobba med policyutvärdering i Sverige?
Ja, jag tänkte när jag hörde att det kommer två personer från UK att det skulle vara väldigt annorlunda därför att i Sverige har vi små departement och stora myndigheter kan man väl säga, och i UK så har de stora departement och väldigt mycket av det som i Sverige sker i mer eller mindre oberoende myndigheter sker där inom ramen för departementens egen verksamhet. Och då skulle man ju kunna tänka att det blir väldigt annorlunda. Min känsla när jag har hört de här presentationerna är att inte så annorlunda ändå. Och jag tog med mig flera lärdomar som vi nog skulle kunna må bra av att faktiskt göra mer av i Sverige. Trots att vi inte är en del av departementen. Den här databasen sa ju redan jag tyckte det var en fantastiskt bra idé som man borde på något vis bygga vidare på ett eller annat sätt. Samarbeta mellan olika länder och mellan forskning och policy. Det tror jag är en jättebra idé. Jag känner igen beskrivningen av det här att man behöver någon form av senior person som ser till att saker händer på det sätt de ska hända. Vi kan i våra kontakter i IFAU med Arbetsförmedlingen som jag vet mest om då kan vi bli hur ense som helst om vi talar med personer som jobbar på analys på Arbetsförmedlingen. För vi har ungefär samma mindset. Vi tycker att samma saker är bra och borde göras och sådär. Och på ungefär samma sätt. Men det händer ingenting om det inte är någon i Arbetsförmedlingens ledningsgrupp som tycker samma sak. Det måste på något vis avsättas resurser, prioriteras, annars händer det inte. Hur bra man än tycker att det är bland de som tycker sig veta att det är bra med evidens. Så att det tror jag är en jätteviktig insikt och att man ska liksom medvetet försöka skaffa sig den typen av kontakter, vilket naturligtvis inte är så lätt. Nu har vi den stora fördelen då att GD på Arbetsförmedlingen numera är före detta GD på IFAU. Så vi hoppas att det kommer att sippra ner på ett eller annat vis till oss också. Mer evidensproducerad. Så att det var ju en sak. Jag såg listningen av pitfalls som gjorde, det känner man ju igen jättemycket då, att allt till alla samtidigt är ganska vanligt ändå. Och det går ofta att med väldigt lätta avsteg från detta göra någonting mycket bättre. Och ja, överhuvudtaget den typen av erfarenheter känner jag igen. Sen ställde jag en fråga till Catherine här efteråt. Jag tänkte vara intresserad av svaret. På IFA har vi ju som princip att inte ge policyrådgivning överhuvudtaget. Utan vi sysslar med att ge underlag för beslutsfattare, inte förslag till vilka beslut som ska fattas. Så jag frågade Catherine om det och hon sa i deras publicerade verk överhuvudtaget så ger man inte heller rekommendationer faktiskt. Utan i den mån det är rekommendationer så sker det i samtal inom departementen. Och jag tror det är en klok policy som vi delar på IFA därför att vi tror då att det ska man kunna utvärdera med någorlunda oberoende, vilket är en förutsättning för att man ska bli tagen på allvar på sikt, så får man inte bli associerad med den ena eller den andra typen av ståndpunkter systematiskt till exempel. Ja, man skulle kunna göra en lång lista, men det mest slående var att det var väldigt lika egentligen, och i vissa avseenden så känns det som att de har tänkt mycket längre än vad vi har gjort i Sverige faktiskt.
Tack så mycket. Vi kommer ju återkomma såklart till lärdomarna från England. Men Tommy Andersson, du är professor i nationalekonomi vid Lunds universitet och en ledande forskare inom algoritmiskt beslutsfattande. Jag funderade på om jag skulle använda det här uttrycket eftersom jag inte riktigt förstår vad det betyder själv. Men du kanske kan komma in på det, men jag misstänker att det handlar om att fatta beslut med hjälp av algoritmer. Det blev faktiskt lite lättare för mig när jag rephrased på det sättet. Men du arbetar ju nära dialog med beslutsfattare som faktiskt liksom gör saker på olika nivåer, från kommun till region kanske, men också så på nationell nivå. De här samarbetena har bland annat resulterat i Skandinaviens första algoritmbaserade organbytesprogram. Även världens första algoritmbaserade system för placeringar av kvotflyktingar i USA. Och sen så har det även hjälpt kommuner i södra Sverige med att förbättra skolvalsutfall. Så du är ju inte riktigt i den här utvärderingsdelen av policy utan mer designdelen. Så jag tänkte höra med dig, vad känner du igen dig av det här när du så att säga, träffar de personer som ska utföra de här interventionerna, åtgärderna och reformerna, och vilka konkreta hinder har du mött och vad är också dina framgångsrecept?
Ja, framgångsreceptet är enkelt, det heter kaffe. Och för det är nämligen så det går till när man ska försöka driva igenom saker. Så om vi tar det från början då, så jag är ju forskare först och främst, men jag vill ju gärna forska på saker som jag tror är nyttigt och bra. Och då får man lite sjuka idéer ibland om saker som man läser om som man tycker att det här borde vi kunna fixa till. Och då ska vi komma ihåg här, precis som du sa, att mycket av fokus tidigare idag har handlat om hur man gör saker och ting på government-nivå, alltså på högsta nivå. Men Sverige, som du också mycket riktigt påpekar, består av 290 kommuner och 21 regioner. Och det är främst där som jag har varit jobbat. Och det har en viss fördel, för det är mycket kortare beslutskedjor. Att du kan vara så att du kommer till en kommun eller en region och sen är det 5 personer som fattar besluten. Det är inget politiskt spel på samma sätt som där på nationell nivå. Vi har försökt ändra saker i 10 år där vi inte har lyckats. Så vad är det då liksom som är viktigt? Och det viktigaste är det som nästan det första som sades här under det första talet idag. Man måste träffa rätt person. För att ofta tycker jag, när man kollar på debatter och om man läser om vad folk tänker och tycker, så får man liksom en bild av att folk kanske inte vill ändra. Min bild är precis tvärtom. Vi har otroligt kompetent folk ute i våra regioner och våra kommuner som vill åstadkomma ändring. Problemet för många av dem är att de inte vet hur de ska åstadkomma ändring. Och att hitta de personerna som faktiskt vill åstadkomma ändring, det är nog nyckeln till allt. Och i början av min karriär fick man ju själv försöka leta rätt på de här. Och så här, jag har en idé om vad man kan göra med njurar. Det är inte för att jag har en idé någon aning om hur medicin funkar, men jag har ändå en idé här, va? Och när man väl hittar en person som på något sätt lyssnar på en, så gäller det att man då börjar prata samma språk. Det var vi också inne på under tidigare diskussioner, att vi som forskare, vi sitter i våra elfenbenstorn och pillar och tittar oss i naveln och har massa idéer om hur man borde förändra samhället. Men vi har ganska dålig koll faktiskt, många av oss, mig inkluderad, på hur samhället faktiskt fungerar. Och då gäller det att man hittar någon man kan prata med och ha ett bollplank så man förstår varandra. Vad är deras problem och hur kan jag hjälpa till att lösa detta? Så det är det ena. Det andra som ett hinder, det är ju då när man vill göra lite mer, vad ska jag säga, på mer nationell nivå. För där kräver det oftast ändring i lagstiftning. Och där är det ett helt annat träsk att ge sig in i. Men jag kanske kan återkomma. Vi har ju en jurist här som...
Ja, det blir en passning till dig att komma in i samtalet igen.
Nej, men jag tänker på det här med den kulturella kontexten. Och det är klart att det är olika kommun, region, eller om man är i en statlig myndighet eller om man är i ett regeringskansli. Så det är viktigt. Och det finns nog väldigt många olika kulturer helt enkelt. Jag har sett olika departement och vet att det funkar på ett visst sätt på ett ställe och på ett helt annat sätt på ett annat ställe. Apropå det här med experiment och kommunförsök. Jättespännande. Det försökte vi oss på i försvarsdepartementet och bereda fram ett regeringsuppdrag till ett experiment. Man skulle samlokalisera ett antal statliga myndigheter, kustbevakning, sjöfartsverk, polis, försvarsmakten etc. på Gotland, Gottsam. Och det var nästan omöjligt att få till det där regeringsbeslutet, därför att det var så många olika intressen och så många olika syn på vad ska det här vara bra för och så vidare. Så det är ju jätteviktigt vad man skapar för kultur, vad mäts man på. Men då tänker jag, förvaltningspolitiken talar ju om för oss i staten att vi ska vara innovativa. Men då gäller det ju att uppdragsgivaren premierar det också. Och då är man lite inlåst i antingen regelverk, men nästan oftare i det här finansiella ramverket och med anslagets ändamål. Man får inte göra vissa saker. Så det blir lite segt.
Men behövs det liksom lagändringar för det, eller mer kultur och normer?
Det är en kombination. Det finns en massa onödiga hinder. Som riksrevisor, Riksrevisionen hamnar ofta i rekommendationer då, men jag håller med dig Anders om inte på den där detaljnivån, för det skulle ju göra det omöjligt för Riksrevisionen att komma tillbaka, utan det är övergripande rekommendationer till regeringen. Se till att man kan utbyta information mellan myndigheter i staten, eller ibland är det faktiskt inom en myndighet omöjligt att utbyta information, apropå att det är så otroligt viktigt för att kunna både fatta välgrundade beslut men också kunna utvärdera att man har tillgång till data. Så där har vi många hinder.
100%, Tommy.
Ja, på samma tema egentligen. Om man tar mitt hemmaområde så att säga, arbetsmarknadspolitik. Så idag så bedrivs arbetsmarknadspolitik av omställningsorganisationer, Arbetsförmedlingen, privata externa leverantörer till Arbetsförmedlingen och kommuner. För att systemet som helhet ska kunna funka någorlunda väl så borde de här kunna kommunicera med varandra, utbyta information så att den ena handen vet vad den andra gör eller har gjort. Det är väldigt svårt. Vi vet väsentligen från forskningssidan nästan ingenting om vad som sker inom ramen för omställningsorganisationer och inom ramen för kommunernas verksamhet. Vi vet mindre om vad som sker inom ramen för det externa leverantörer gör än det Arbetsförmedlingen gör, även om den skillnaden är mindre. Så att informationsutbyte och att man på något vis, även om det kan vara besvärligt att dokumentera saker, det hjälper i många sammanhang, inte bara forskningen utan också faktiskt utförandet av det man ska göra. Och det där tror jag är väldigt bortglömt. Och kommunerna har ju då en grundlagsskyddad rätt att göra som de vill i väldigt många avseenden. Så att det är liksom ingen lätt nöt att knäcka om man nu vill knäcka den nöten.
Men till exempel de här omställningsorganisationerna, de är ju inte 290 utan de är ju kanske 5 eller något sånt där. Om ni ber snällt, eller deras huvudmän, hur är deras liksom villighet att dela med sig av?
Vi har bett snällt i 10-15 års tid.
Var tror du skon klämmer där?
Ja, det vet vi inte riktigt säkert. Det vi vet är att vi vid ett tillfälle fick tillgång till data från en av dem. De blev sedan missnöjda med hur data utnyttjades och det brukar användas som ett argument mot oss när vi frågar. Och exakt vad detta återspeglar är svårt att veta. I övriga organisationer säger att nej, ungefär, vi får inga goda skäl som jag ser det. Och det känns som skattebetalare lite tristare numera när vi dessutom delvis skattefinansierar den här verksamheten efter den här stora överenskommelsen som involverade även omställningsstudiestödet.
Ja, ibland är det också väldigt, apropå det här med data då, så att olika myndigheter sitter på olika data och för att göra en del experiment eller vad man nu kanske skulle vilja göra så kräver det då att man får tillgång till den här datan. Men det där är någonting som jag i alla fall åkt bet på ett par gånger att myndigheter inte får dela data mellan varandra. Så det man skulle vilja göra, och då pratar vi inte sån här full-blown upscale hela Sverige utan man kanske vill göra det i någon kommun eller sådär. Så visar det sig att det är helt omöjligt på grund av att de här myndigheterna inte får dela data av varandra och inte dela med mig heller för den delen. Och det där, det finns ju såklart ett väldigt bra skäl till att det är så. Och man ska såklart vara väldigt noga med vilken data som delas och till vem. Men våra politiker borde fundera på om det ibland finns skäl faktiskt att om man till exempel har en ordentlig etikprövning och den här typen av grejer, hur man skulle kunna få använda data och eventuellt kunna designa vissa experiment. För då skulle vi kunna ta oss ett steg närmare den här policybaserade evidensmodellerna som jag tror många av oss gärna skulle vilja ha.
tänkte bara öppna upp för er som sitter här i publiken också om ni vill ställa frågor, men även komma med inlägg och kommentarer vill jag verkligen understryka att vi är väldigt måna om att ni deltar. Så se det som en uppmaning att tänka ut vad ni vill säga. Och det är bara att räcka upp handen när, ja där, varsågod, vänta på en mikrofon.
Ja, hej, Patrik Tingvall, Kommerskollegium. Och jag har ju en bakgrund som är nationalekonom då. Och håller på med utvärderingar i säkert 20 år inom olika kapaciteter, både forskare på olika myndigheter. Och jag har en sak, här är en fråga också hur utredningar tas emot. Och min erfarenhet är väl att då jag kommer med någon utvärdering på något program och det har varit ett positivt budskap, det här var kanon, då blir man lätt hyllad som norra Europas bästa ekonometriker. Medan om jag säger att det här var nog inte så bra, det var lite problem med det här, då har man förmodligen gjort något fel. Och det här gör ju att liksom olika budskap tas emot på olika sätt. Det de har gjort som, det är lätt att fortsätta, men lägga in backen är mycket svårare. Jag vill bara höra med er som är uppe på podiet.
Men tänker du från så här, politikens sida?
Både från politiken och de mottagande myndigheter som nu liksom är utsatt för den här granskningen, om man kan kalla det så. Så hur hanterar ni det och vad har ni för erfarenheter?
Tommy,
ska jag börja? Ja. Alltså jag kommer då från andra sidan eftersom mig träffar man på när jag tycker att de gör fel från början så att säga. Och det är kanske inte, och det är klart, det är ofta så, i alla fall i början när jag kontaktar folk så då kanske de inte var supersugna på det. Men nu börjar jag inte kontakta folk längre, för de kontaktar mig själva och de vet att de gör fel från början så att säga. Eller åtminstone vet de inte om de gör rätt. Och då ibland kan det bara vara att vi skickar 5-6 mejl tillbaka till varandra, fram och tillbaka till varandra, och för att de ska få liksom bekräftelse att de gör det nog helt okej, eller åtminstone inte helt dåligt. Och ibland så leder det till andra projekt där vi helt enkelt ändrar om hur de tänker kring vissa frågor och kanske gör det mer systematiskt och sådär. Så att från min sida, det här med att någonting inte fungerar eller att det är fel, det är liksom en förutsättning för att jag överhuvudtaget ska komma in i projektet. Så jag har liksom aldrig sett den sidan som du pratar om.
Lena?
Jag kan absolut känna igen det där, och det är väl lite grann det jag var inne på, att det handlar om kulturen i den miljön där man verkar. Så att etiketten NIH också, not invented here, det är lite sådana tendenser kan det finnas. Men jag tror att det är också lite kopplat till vad är det för typ av utvärdering? Grundar den sig på kvantitativa och algoritmiska analyser etc.? Det är lättare på något sätt att få genomslag. Men har man använt sig av andra metoder och det är kvalitativa och då finns det ofta hos mottagaren en föreställning att det här är liksom subjektivt och allmänt tyckande. Så jag tror att det är en kunskapsfråga. Jag tyckte det var otroligt spännande med den här utbildningen som de har satt igång, så att vi höjer liksom förståelsen och nivån. Mottagningskapaciteten är väl någonting jag kan oroa mig för då i vår lite speciella miljö i Sverige med ett litet regeringskansli, ett litet huvud och en stor kropp. Och hur ska detta lilla huvud kunna ta emot och absorbera all den här kunskap och klokskap?
Jag tänker lite innan jag släpper in det, Anders, att det handlar ju också om den här avvägningen mellan att främja och förbättra och att utkräva ansvar. Där är såklart liksom utvärderingar och granskningar så har ju såklart en viktig komponent i att utkräva ansvar också. Men det kan ju också vara till, eller bör ju också vara till för att liksom förbättra och ändra saker som inte funkar. Och att jag tänker att om det har det här ansvarsutkrävande, om det är en slagsida åt det hållet, då blir det också lättare eller då blir det den naturliga impulsen att försvara sig. Och det kanske handlar om hur pass gemensamma, har vi verkligen den här gemensamma målbilden att vi vill förbättra slutresultatet. Det kan ju också vara så att man på vägen till att förbättra effekterna måste vissa personer göra saker på ett annat sätt eller kanske inte göra saker alls. Det är kanske andra människor som ska göra vissa. Det är liksom, man kanske skyddar sin profession, sitt jobb, sin roll. Jag vet inte, skulle ni vilja reflektera lite kring det?
Ja, jag kan ju reflektera utifrån huvudsakligen de kontakter som jag via IFAU har haft med framförallt tjänstemän på arbetsmarknadsdepartementet om man ska vara specifik här. Och där har jag en känsla av att vi pratar samma språk i väldigt stor utsträckning. De är intresserade av de resultat som vi producerar, oavsett vad det faktiskt pekar åt. Jag har inte uppfattat att det är liksom en spärr att man inte ska leverera dåliga nyheter så att säga. Jag tror mer att faktum är att IFAU en gång i tiden körde utbildningar i utvärderingsmetoder. Vi hade heldagar på IFAU i vårt seminarierum där vi tog emot folk som fick lära sig lite grann om hur vi ser på vad det är att utvärdera. Och vi menar ju då samma sak som de brittiska kollegorna gjorde, nämligen att det handlar åtminstone i första hand om att skatta effekter av olika saker med kontrafaktiska metoder. Och det är inte alla som förstår det. Och det tror jag kan vara ett problem. Jag har försökt övertyga folk på kommuner om att köra saker. Och då måste man förklara att men det krävs att det finns en målgrupp som är större än den grupp personer som får ta del av insatsen. Annars blir det aldrig någonting gjort. Och det är inte ovilja utan det är mer att man måste på något vis låta droppen urholka stenen och tala om att så här gör vi och det kan ni ha nytta av. Och så måste vi vara duktiga på att tala om det. Många av oss har ju inte meriterat oss i första hand genom att vara duktiga på att kommunicera med personer i kommuner, utan snarare med redaktörer för engelskspråkiga vetenskapliga tidskrifter. Och det är inte riktigt samma sak alltid.
Lena, skulle du vilja kommentera lite på det? Du var inne på det här med olika typer av metoder, kvantitativa kontra kvalitativa, och det här hur gemensam bild har vi av vad en bra utvärdering är och hur viktigt är det?
Jag tror att det är lite, det finns väldigt många olika bilder av vad utvärdering är, men jag tror ändå att vi i huvudsak i Sverige tenderar att tänka på utvärdering som ett sätt att lära och förbättra. Riksrevisionens bildande för över 20 år sedan, då var det väldigt mycket fokus på det här ansvarsutkrävandet. Och det menar jag var fel. Riksrevisionen har inte en roll i att vara ansvarsutkrävande, utan den är ett stöd för riksdagen och dess kontrollmakt. Och för övrigt har faktiskt riksdagen enligt regeringsformen, jag är tillbaka i den, en roll att utvärdera inom varje utskott ska utvärdera sitt politikområde. Det där tycker jag är lite spännande. Är man medveten om det i regeringskansliet när man tar fram underlag för beslut? Gör man de här reformerna utvärderingsbara etc.? Nej, och det är återigen här, jag tror inte det är av illvilja eller brist på, det ska gå fort och man har kanske inte kunskapen och man premieras kanske inte heller för det. Så det är lite grann vilken kultur skapar vi och vad frågar vi efter? Vad ställer vi för frågor i samband med att man tar fram underlag till beslutsfattarna?
Men skulle du vilja se en sorts evaluation task force inne på regeringskansliet i Sverige?
Så jag skulle vilja att de här frågorna kom högre upp på dagordningen i samband med att beslut bereds fram. Men också lite på det som Shirin var inne på. Bort med kunskapsnonchalansen, höja så att säga tilltron. Vi har ju en väldigt tillitsbaserad styrning i Sverige. Men den är kanske på väg att krackelera lite. Höj tilltron till statstjänstemännens roll, som faktiskt enligt regeringsformen är att vara sakliga, objektiva och ta fram de bästa underlagen. Vi har våra beredningskrav, vi har vårt kommittéväsende, vårt remissinstitut som ger en väldigt, väldigt god möjlighet. Och alla dessa analysmyndigheter, och vi har ESO och vi har SBU och FOI har jag redan nämnt, Brottsförebyggande rådet så att säga. Men tar man emot det här och omsätts det i faktiskt beslut?
En fråga här.
Ja, Carolina Ekholm, Riksgälden.
Carolina, lite närmare.
Jaha, men hörs? Eller
Det hörs när det är nära.
Ja, det hörs. Okej. Jag ville haka på den här, det ni sa om relationen mellan policyrådgivning och utvärdering. Jag har ju ett förflutet också i regeringskansliet och jag tror att i alla fall bitvis så har jag nog haft känslan att det har gått 5 utvärderare på en person som ska sitta och skriva beslutsunderlag för viktiga politiska beslut. Och jag minns, jag var ju bland annat statssekreterare då flyktingkrisen 2015 när jag i desperation ringde just till Anders och frågade, kan du hjälpa oss? Vad ska vi göra nu? Och du då mycket riktigt påtalade att du ger ju inte policyrekommendationer så eftersom ni utvärderar politiken. Men det där skapar ju ändå, särskilt i den typen av situationer, lite av ett vakuum. Därför att alla sprang omkring i regeringskansliet och visste ju inte riktigt hur man ska hantera. Det kom 160 000 människor, vad gör vi nu? Och som ni har varit inne på, regeringskansliet är väldigt, väldigt slimmat. Man har väldigt få personer som har i uppgift att ta fram då liksom adekvat underlag för politikbeslut. Samtidigt har vi alla de här myndigheterna och personer som är disputerade och kan metoder och allt möjligt som sitter sen och utvärderar. Så jag skulle bara vilja höra era reflektioner kring det här.
Kanske ta laget runt här. Tommy, vill du börja?
Alltså för min del så jag ger ju mycket policyråd. Men det baseras alltid på forskning. Inte alltid nödvändigtvis min egen forskning utan andra människors forskning. Jag tycker nästan att jag förstår att om man är som IFA en myndighet att det är en annan sak, men som enskilda forskare tycker jag nästan vi har en skyldighet att om vi kan underbygga det vi säger så att säga. Och om det finns konflikt av interest eller det finns andra saker som gör att eller man kanske, vad vet jag, någon kanske har någon politisk bakgrund och om man bara är tydlig med det så tycker jag mycket väl vi kan komma med policyrekommendationer. Och jag tycker faktiskt vi borde göra det mycket mer än vad vi gör. Och det där ligger lite grann i forskarens natur att man är otroligt liksom rädd för att säga fel, allt ska vara noggrant och precis och det håller jag ju såklart med om. Samtidigt vet jag ju också att verkligheten inte ser ut som ett forskningslabb utan verkligheten är lite annorlunda. Och ibland, som sades också under tidigare panel, så ibland är det bättre att komma med någon typ av råd eller policyrekommendation som baseras på någonting som vi tror är nästan rätt i alla fall, än att man famlar helt i blindo. Och sen är det upp till mottagaren sen och välja vad de vill göra med det. Och jag har ju aldrig varit med om att någon gång någon direkt har sagt så här, shit vad bra Tommy, skitbra, vi kör. Utan det är alltid en dialog fram och tillbaka. Så jag tycker nog att vi som enskilda forskare i alla fall har ett lite större ansvar. Vi borde bli mycket bättre på att komma just med policyråd.
Gärna.
Jag tycker inte man ska blanda ihop rollerna, men jag tror att man kan göra mycket mera i den här policy-delen genom att använda sina myndigheter eller förstärka regeringskansliet med den typen av kompetens. Men sen sätter du ljuset på någonting som är väldigt intressant. Hur hanterar vi det när vi lever under en väldigt pressad situation? Beslutsfattandet vid kriser. Och då tror jag man får tänka helt utanför boxen och kavla upp skjortärmarna tillsammans och pröva helt nya metoder. För då är det ju precis det här att inte fatta ett beslut, det blir också ett beslut. Och det var de inte inne på, våra brittiska vänner, men de har en väldigt intressant funktion i UK som National Chief Scientists som egentligen har en särskild roll for emergencies, att koordinera professorer och olika vetenskapliga rön då vid en kris och ge råd just i det här pressade läget. Det är kanske någonting som vi kunde ta till oss.
Anders?
Vi kan ju ta det här med flyktinginströmningen som exempel här. Jag skulle säga att det som jag som forskare skulle kunna bistå med i första hand är evidens om vilka effekter detta skulle kunna tänkas få på inrikesföddas sysselsättning, arbetslöshet, deras löner, på utrikesföddas arbetsmarknadsintegration och ett antal andra frågor utifrån vad vi vet från forskning om de här sakerna. Och vi visste en del, men vi visste alldeles för lite då, skulle jag nog säga. Men den typen av råd känner jag mig aldrig, om man nu ska kalla det råd, att tala om vad forskningen säger. Det tycker jag är uppenbart att man ska göra. Man ska dessutom prioritera att göra det på ett sätt som är begripligt för andra än sina forskarkollegor. Vilket vi har tagit ad notam på IFA och ger ut all vår forskning i en svensk populärversion, så att säga, just av det skälet. Men sen tycker jag personligen att om någon frågar mig om att jag kan komma in till departementet och prata igenom frågorna, inte skriva en rapport, men däremot vara ett bollplank, så säger jag aldrig nej. Därför det tycker jag också på något vis är min skyldighet mot skattebetalarna i grund och botten.
Amen.
Jo, om vi hakar på flyktingkrisen då, så där försökte jag och mitt internationella team att göra ganska mycket coola grejer som vi har gjort i USA, England och andra ställen, baserat på massa olika saker, inte bara arbetsmarknadsintegration men också såna här grundläggande saker. Så i Sverige hade vi ett stort problem till exempel med överhuvudtaget, var ska vi placera de här människorna, var finns det lediga hus och sådär. Och boenden, och det där skapar ju en andrahandsmarknad som var ganska brutal och kostsam för skattebetalarna. Men där är ett väldigt bra exempel på när vi då i Sverige inte har myndigheter som är rustade för att ta emot liksom den typ av hjälp. Jag säger inte att de ska göra som vi säger, men det var ju i Sverige, anledningen till att vi pratade ju med Sverige på både migrationsverk och arbetsförmedling och andra ställen, var runt, vi var uppe på regeringskansliet och försökte, det här var idéer vi har liksom. Men det var ju helt kört. Det gick ju inte, för att då skulle 3 myndigheter prata med varandra och det fanns olika lagspråk. Och sen är ju just det, Arbetsförmedlingen har ju det ansvaret, men det ansvaret överlappar inte med Migrationsverkets ansvar och så vidare. Och där skulle jag önska att det fanns liksom en mer sån, liksom en typ emergency, där man får liksom, jag ska inte säga att man ska böja på lagstiftningen och liksom, det är inte det jag säger här, men det borde finnas någon möjlighet att i kristid i alla fall kunna tänka lite mer öppet. Och det är också därför vi inte gjorde det i Sverige, för vi orkar ju inte helt enkelt. Vi hade inte tid, utan det fanns intresse från USA och andra länder, så då gjorde vi det där istället helt enkelt. På grund av att där fanns mer flexibilitet, och då ska vi också säga i det här fallet att de har helt andra sätt att organisera sitt flyktingmottagande än vad vi har i Sverige, så att det finns ju såklart stora liksom skillnader i hur lagstiftning och förvaltningar och frivilligorganisationer fungerar, framförallt vilken roll de har. Så man kan inte översätta vad man gör i USA mot Sverige, men det är ett väldigt bra exempel på att det funkar inte alls att jobba med de här grejerna i kristid i Sverige, för det fanns helt enkelt inte lagstöd för att göra det.
Helena?
Så jag tror inte att det är lagarna som egentligen sätter så många hinder för oss att agera lite snabbfotat och kreativt och nytänkande vid kriser. Jag har ju varit krishanterare i ganska många år som generaldirektör i MSB och på Försvarsdepartementet som expeditions- och rättschef etc. Så att det finns alltid möjligheter. Men det som är vårt dilemma i Sverige, det är att vi är så tillbakalutade. Och då kanske den här regeringsformen återigen är vårt största hinder. För det ska beredas och det ska vara konsensus och det ska vara så väldigt grundat allting. Det har man inte tid med i en krishantering. Då måste man kortsluta alla de här processerna. Och att få in det i ryggmärgen på statstjänstemännen som är fostrade i en annan kultur, det är en utmaning. Men det tror jag vi behöver jobba mycket, mycket mera med. Och det tänker jag kommer tillbaka då till utvärdering. Inom försvarsområdet så är man ganska van vid att utvärdera till exempel stora övningar. Totalförsvarsövningar eller samverkansövningar inom det civila området. Och varje utvärdering tas emot och läses och begrundas. Men omsätts det sen till praktiskt handlande och kunskap? Nej. Lite deprimerande. Ja. Man gör utvärderingar, man kommer fram, sätter ljuset på tillkortakommanden i varenda kris. Och jag lovar er, i varenda kris är det samma slutsatser som dras. Och då handlar det inte alls om regelverket faktiskt, utan det handlar om människorna i systemet.
Ja. Vi har en fråga där.
Peter Strömbeck heter jag, civilingenjör. Jag vill lyfta fram det. Jag har inte så mycket en fråga, men en reflektion. Jag har varit myndighetschef i 2 omgångar och också på regeringskansliet. Jag har haft förmånen, jag tänkte fånga upp det här från våra brittiska vänner, det vill säga processer, kultur och kompetens. Jag har haft en förmån att innan jag blev statstjänsteman verka i näringslivet, och där och som jag bar med mig in i statstjänstemannarollen var just det här med ledningssystem. Där det handlar om att liksom slipa processerna och verksamheten utifrån ett perspektiv där man tittar på plan, do, act, check. Och i de verksamheterna jag kom in i, må vara regeringskansliet eller myndigheten, har det präglats ganska mycket av plan, do, act. Men det här check som är då kopplat till evidensbasering är ett sätt att slipa processerna men också få in bygga en kunskap kring just det här med att följa upp och evidensbasera. Och så där kan man ta lite inspiration av både försvaret kanske, men också näringslivet.
Är det någon som vill kommentera? Helena?
Nej, men det är absolut jätteviktigt att det följs upp, och det är väl bra om man i designen av någon politisk reform och så vidare har med det här elementet också. Men det är återigen en kunskapsfråga, och sen kanske lite mera aktivitet på området. Nu har jag inte gjort min research och sett hur mycket har utskotten verkligen utvärderat och följt upp politiken inom sina respektive områden. Men jag har ju noterat att finansutskottet till exempel har nu fått ett specifikt uppdrag att följa upp Riksbanken. Hur går man tillväga med det? Och börjar riksdagen efterfråga, då tvingar man också fram ett beteende från regeringskansliet och så vidare. Så att förhoppningsvis kanske vi får in mer av det här.
Fast det där är också lite mer makronivå, va? Alltså liksom Riksbanken, det är ju liksom, det är en ganska stor grej som har ganska många saker. Det jag tänker liksom vad som är viktigt är så här, vilken typ av arbetsmarknadsåtgärder fungerar? Hur mycket tjänar man på att bredda en motorväg i Mellansverige? Alltså det är den typen av mikrofrågor där jag tror att det finns ganska mycket pengar och tid och att spara faktiskt. Och liv också för den delen om man gör det på rätt sätt. Och det är där jag tror kanske egentligen att den här policy-evidensen kanske är som starkast, och det som IFA håller på med mycket bra interventioner, att man försöker titta på olika effekter av olika saker. Man har kanske med en design från början. Och det är också det vi pratade om den första halvan av panelen. Det är den typ av grejer som jag tror liksom vi främst ska fokusera på, för att lägga liksom 2 miljarder spänn på någon typ av åtgärd som visar sig inte fungera. Det är ju bortkastade pengar för allihopa. Finns det en som kostar kanske lika mycket som är bättre effekt, eller en för halva priset som är lika stor effekt, så det är bra, viktig information att få reda på. Och det är nog på den nivån snarare än att titta på liksom hela myndigheter, att utvärdera hela myndigheter, för det är något annat. Men
du är inne på en väldigt intressant grej som jag hade tänkt fråga er om. Catherine och Miriam, de var ju de tog ju det här kostnadsargumentet det återkom hela tiden. Det kostar så här mycket, kan vi göra det billigare? Så här mycket pengar kan inte gå till spillo. Tycker ni att det argumentet i policyutvärdering används för lite i Sverige? Alltså man tänker sig, vad är effekterna när det inte handlar när det handlar om till exempel arbetsmarknadspolitiska eller sociala liksom, åtgärder, så Anders?
Det korta svaret är ja. Jag tror att vi lägger ner väldigt mycket energi på att ta reda på intäktssidan av saker. Finns det en intäkt i termer av att folk kommer snabbare till jobb? Hur stor är den i så fall? Det kan vi skatta. Men vi har väldigt, väldigt sällan tillgång till någorlunda tillförlitliga uppgifter på vad saker faktiskt har kostat. Vilket innebär att vi väldigt, väldigt sällan kan jämföra intäkter och kostnader med varann. Och vi har påpekat detta för framförallt Arbetsförmedlingen genom åren, men det brukar inte hända speciellt mycket, speciellt ofta i just det avseendet.
Era vänner.
De är en del av vännerna, men just där har de varit mindre vänliga än vanligt. Ja, jag instämmer fullständigt såklart. Och det här hänger egentligen i samband med det här som jag egentligen tog upp först och som vi har pratat om tidigare, att man måste träffa rätt personer. Och när man väl har träffat rätt personer så måste de få reda på varför de ska göra kanske en omställning eller göra ett experiment eller någonting. För det kommer ju ta tid och resurser och kräva saker från dem. Och då måste man liksom tala om att det finns någonting för er. Och det kan vara allt möjligt. Det kan vara till exempel att om vi gör det här så blir det rättssäkert så ni slipper tillbringa lika mycket tid i förvaltningsdomstol som ni hatar. Eller det kan vara att vi kommer att rädda mer människoliv om vi gör på det här sättet så du slipper tala om för någon att de ska dö. Det kan också vara, och det är ofta det främsta argumentet, att det här spar tid och pengar. Till exempel att en datamaskin kan göra det här på 1% av tiden mot 4 människor. Och då kan ni göra roligare saker eller bättre saker eller ägna åt mer kvalitativt uppföljningsarbete och sånt. Så det är oftast när man hittar rätt person så måste de måste förstå att det finns någonting att tjäna. Och då tror jag det är kostnadsargumentet, för det är någonting inom all offentlig förvaltning och även inom privata sfären såklart att man vill alltid trycka ner sina kostnader. Så det är ett jättebra argument, och sen håller jag såklart med om att det inte alltid är så lätt att skatta de här kostnaderna. Vi försökte förstå hur mycket pengar vi hade sparat på de här djurbytesgrejerna vi håller på med, så kom vi fram till någonstans mellan 700 miljoner och 1,4 miljarder, och det är ett ganska brett spann där liksom.
Jag vill börja med att säga att jag håller naturligtvis med dig, Tommy. Det är olika storheter, makronivån, men jag tror ändå makronivån är viktig. Sen tror jag man kan komma väldigt långt och vara på de här mera avgränsade områdena lite mera snabbfotat kanske. Men jag ser det som alltså britterna är otroligt duktiga. De har alltid den här kostnadsaspekten i förgrunden, och inom deras National Audit Office så kallar man inte effektivitetsrevision för det som alla andra revisionsmyndigheter kallar det för performance audit, utan man kallar det för value for money audit. Så att det elementet finns väldigt tydligt i den brittiska traditionen, och det borde vi nog ta till oss mer. Väldigt många av våra myndigheter ska göra samhällsekonomiska analyser innan man kör igång med att bygga en ny motorväg eller ett höghastighets järnvägsnät etc. Här tror jag det finns jättemycket att göra med hjälp av forskare och dina algoritmer.
Det vet jag inte, men framförallt så kräver det, för att man överhuvudtaget ska kunna göra en sån analys, att det finns evidensbaserad forskning som man kan basera den på. Det är liksom steg 1. Utan det kan man inte skriva, då får man bara gissa. Och det brukar inte gå så bra ofta.
Har vi en fråga här?
Ja, tack. Det känns som att jag har fått trådar till svar på min fråga redan, men jag ställer den och gör en reflektion. I Sverige har vi ett väldigt fint utredningsväsende. Mitt intryck, med risk för att generalisera, är ju att man i huvudsak läser och intervjuar och resonerar sig fram till förslag som i slutändan är rätt så spekulativa. Men mer sällan så testar man inom ramen för en utredning, och ändå så är vi väl överens om att idealmässigt någonstans så är experiment the gold standard. Så min fråga är vad det är som gör, vad är svårigheterna som gör att vi i Sverige i mindre utsträckning, skulle jag säga, i alla fall den anglosaxiska världen, inte använder experiment för att, så att säga, iterativt, proaktivt testa fram vilken policy som fungerar. Man kan ju naturligtvis lätt se vanskligheterna på att experimentera på totalförsvarsområdet, men det finns ju, Helena har varit inne på några exempel, och man har gjort piloter och tittat på totalförsvarsutvecklingen på Gotland till exempel. Men just experiment. Jag är inte forskare, men när jag jobbade på en annan myndighet så fick jag möjlighet att åka till Cambridge och läsa en Executive Master i evidence-based policing. Nu fick jag höra av Catherine i pausen här att min professor var den som var ansvarig för det här experimentet man fick avbryta. Men det finns rätt så många exempel inom polisforskningen där man faktiskt genomför större experiment till stöd för policyutveckling. Min fråga är, vad är det som gör att vi inte kan göra det i...
Till att börja med så är det ju en felaktig beskrivning att vi inte gör det. Vi gör en hel del ganska stora experiment, speciellt i samarbete med Arbetsförmedlingen, eller Arbetsförmedlingen själv för övrigt också. Så att det görs. Sen tycker jag personligen att det kunde göras mer än vad det görs. Att man regelbundet borde tänka över när man introducerar någonting nytt, framförallt om detta går att utvärdera på något lämpligt sätt innan man gör det för alla i hela landet, så att man tar reda på om det är bra. Och då är det förmodligen en ganska bra idé, ganska ofta i alla fall, att göra det med någon form av randomiserat försök. För då kan man vara mer säker än annars på att det faktiskt, man lär sig det man ska lära sig av det. Däremot tror jag att idén är mycket svårare att genomföra om det är någonting som handlar om en utvärdering av någonting som är pågående. För då handlar det om att lägga till eller dra bort någonting, och då kan man lära sig någonting om vad det innebär att lägga till eller dra bort på ett kontrollerat sätt. Men man kan inte, så att säga, bara slumpmässigt avskaffa någonting till exempel.
Men Anders, får jag fråga en relaterad fråga apropå det här med olika politikområden. Hur mycket, liksom inte samarbete, men mycket kontakt har ni på IFAU med andra liknande institut och myndigheter som har liknande uppdrag som ert, men inom andra sakområden, för att utbyta erfarenheter och fila på metoder och så?
Alltså, det utbyte vi har är kanske inte främst med andra myndigheter i Sverige, skulle jag säga. Vi har ju utbyte med andra forskare i Sverige och världen. Och vi har visst utbyte med andra institut som håller på med liknande saker i andra länder. Däremot så finns det inte speciellt många andra myndigheter som håller på med forskning. Och vi är forskare primärt. Och det kan man för övrigt tillägga vad det gäller det här med utredningar. Så, som jag ser det så är väl utredningarnas huvuduppgift att sammanställa befintlig evidens, inte att producera ny i första hand.
Nej, jag tänker att en viktig diskussion här apropå utredningar. Det är ju det här beslutet man måste fatta när man ska liksom införa en reform. Och det andra är så här, okej, men även trots att man har gjort en utredning så vill man ju kanske veta så här, funkar det i det här fallet? För ofta kanske inte så att man vill slänga alltihop över bord, men man vill ju ändå se om just den här tillämpningen är bra. Så det är ju det är inte riktigt samma sak, och man använder inte forskning på samma sätt där. Det är en fråga här borta.
Ja, hejsan. Jag heter Joakim Ramsberg, kommer från Järnfonden nu. Och, jag har tidigare haft en lång bakgrund ifrån myndighetsvärlden och senast vård- och omsorgsanalys. Och där hade jag en intressant erfarenhet där man skulle genomföra en stor, faktiskt väldigt dyr och stor reform som ännu inte alltså hade startat. Och så blev vi inblandade i det här väldigt tidigt för att lägga upp hur skulle man utvärdera detta. Och då var jag på ett möte och det var helt uppenbart att här behövde man ett experiment och ett randomiserat experiment för att sen kunna säga vad effekten var. Och mitt förslag, måste jag tyvärr säga, överlevde inte det så kallade skratttestet på det här mötet. Och då tror jag att det fanns två saker. Dels var det här med kunskapen om varför man måste randomisera var väldigt, väldigt låg i de politiska delen av det här mötet. Och det tror jag är jätteviktigt. Men egentligen hade det inte spelat så stor roll. Därför att det var ganska uppenbart att det här var framförhandlat. Och det var en stor politisk seger för en av parterna. Och intresset för att om 4 år få veta att det här inte funkade kan jag säga var 0. Och den här satsningen, alltså alla de här pengarna, jag tror värdet av alla de pengarna, om en mer cyniskt lagd person, och jag skulle nog kanske säga att det var redan uppnått när man framstår som handlingskraftig på ett område som var viktigt för väljare och så vidare. Jag vet inte om det här är något ni känner igen ifrån er egen verksamhet.
Det var väl
Helena,
lite Shireen på det, tycker jag, väldigt tydligt. Och det är ju, och våra brittiska gäster, de var ju väl medvetna om politikens villkor, så att säga. Så det är klart att den här forskarvärlden, evidensvärlden möter politiska realiteter, helt enkelt. Men jag tror ändå att vi skulle må bra av på alla nivåer att öka kunskapen om vikten av att göra utvärderingar, att designa olika reformer från början så att de går att utvärdera.
Jag tänkte apropå det, lite som en avslutande, för nu är det snart slut på den här delen av dagen innan vi äter lunch. Så tänkte jag, och kanske så här, sluta lite på en positiv tonläge. Om var och en av er kan dela någonting som ni tar med er från Miriam och Catherines presentationer och hur det går till i England. Vill du börja, Tommy?
Alltså för det första så kände jag igen nästan allt de sa. Liksom. Så jag tar med mig mycket och känner mig liksom ganska starkt i att min uppfattning av hur mina kontakter med myndigheterna och kommuner och regioner i Sverige, den verkar påminna ungefär lika mycket om hur de gör där. Men det jag tar med mig, jag gillar den här idén om att man har de här, nu kommer jag inte ihåg vad det hette, men den här taskforcen där man har den här speciella, en utbildning på 1 vecka. Om man kollar på vad de gjorde där så var det ju liksom också med sådana här kvasexperiment, och jag gissar att den här biten som stod liksom teoretiskt baserad evidens, det är väl sånt som jag håller på med, så att det liksom, och det där tyckte jag väldigt mycket om, för att jag tror precis som frågan vi hörde tidigare här, att när man pratar om randomiseringar, eller i mitt fall som att vi gör ju mycket datasimuleringar, och då slipper man ju allt det här med etikprövningar och sånt där, och det är fantastiskt. Men är liksom att kan man använda en datasimulering för att förstå någonting? Liksom att vi kan liksom göra om den här kommunen 1 miljon gånger, och sen kan vi kolla på vad som skulle hända om vi gjorde så här istället för så här och så. Och att om man liksom, det låter nästan som science fiction, men att om man kunde bara förstå de som jobbar med det här, att det finns en del metoder som är liksom godkända av vetenskapssamhället som vi litar på och tror på, så tror jag vi har kommit långt. Så det jag tar med mig, vi ska ha en sån motsvarande kurs här för de som behöver gå den.
Helena?
Ja, men det var ju lite lustigt, Tommy, för jag hade precis fastnat i samma sak. Jag har ju varit inne på det här med vikten av att höja kunskap och kompetens kring de här frågorna. Och sen så tycker jag alltid att det är roligt att få spegla det egna landet, den egna verksamheten i andras erfarenheter, och konstatera att vi är kanske inte så olika trots allt, även om vi har helt olika system och de jobbar på lite annan skala än vi. Så det är väl bara att liksom vila tryggt i att så dåliga är vi inte.
Anders?
Nej, det var nog mitt huvudintryck egentligen också, att det var väldigt mycket samma tankar tänkta i UK som här. Och både vad det gäller så att säga mitt forskarjag och mitt liksom åtminstone beröring med myndigheter jag. reagerade på ungefär samma sätt, att det är inte så förbaskat olikt. Sen kändes det som att i grund och botten hade de ett lite mer formaliserat tänk på hur man ska göra, och det tror jag vi skulle kunna lära en del genom att bygga in obligatoriska stationer med, är det här verkligen så att det finns en utvärderingsplan? Bara ställa frågan tror jag kan spela roll för att det kommer till stånd så småningom mer av det.
Ja, jag tar verkligen med mig det här med kulturen och människorna, och att det handlar om att hitta drivkraften i dem som man ska övertyga, snarare än att försöka övertyga dem bara genom argument. Man måste liksom jobba genom det som människor själv vill göra. Jag vill tacka den här panelen med en applåd. Och tacka alla er för att ni har kommit hit idag, och jag hoppas att ni stannar. Och sen så vill jag också säga, bara slå ett slag för en annan del. Det här var ju en del av vår 75-årsjubileum. En annan viktig del av det är instiftandet av SNS-priset, som går då till en ung, det vill säga max 45 år gammal, forskare som dels är framstående forskare men också duktig då på det här med att nå ut, nå fram, göra skillnad med sin forskning ute i samhället. Och vi delade ut det här priset första gången då förra året, 2023, och nu är det snart dags igen. Vi kommer dela ut det för andra gången i vår den 12 juni 2025, och alldeles strax börjar nomineringsperioden för att nominera kandidater till det här priset. Så jag vill verkligen uppmuntra er att göra det om ni känner duktiga forskare som fyller de här kriterierna och gör spännande saker, så tveka inte att nominera, för det är ju utifrån de nomineringar som kommer in som vi sen kan med hjälp av vår jury välja en pristagare. Tack för idag.